Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to save my life. I'll tell you, in Miami, it's important to speak Spanish.
Oh, absolutely.
People get killed.
Let's call to order City Boarding City Council Workshop Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. Please stand for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can you take roll, please?
Mayor John Eric Hoover,
Here.
Vice Mayor Linda Rodriguez,
Here.
Councilman Tom Kinsella,
Here.
Councilman David Mueller,
Here.
Councilwoman Cherokee Sampson, City Attorney Nancy Meyer, City Manager Matthew Cobbler.
Here. Thank you. First up, comments from the general public. I don't have any signed up. Does anybody like to speak? Show of hands. Moving right along to comments from the city manager. Turn over to Matt Cobbler for his comments. He hasn't.
I have no comments for that.
Okay. And then now the comments from mayor and city council. Anybody have comments?
Nothing.
Duke, please.
We've all made comments up here that we want residents to come and speak and give us their ideas and opinions and so on and so forth. Last meeting, at a regular council meeting, we had a citizen come up and have a viewpoint. And the comeback from another resident was totally uncalled for. The way they were spoken to. I just want to assure the residents that I think we up here hold 100% responsibility for allowing that to continue. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. Both sides of the coin are entitled to their opinion. But the way Mr. McClary was spoken to does not encourage residents to come up to the podium to speak. So I would like to myself apologize to Mr. McClary for allowing that to continue and to happen. Mr. Todd has every right to state his opinion, absolutely, but in the way it was done against Mr. McClary or any resident is just not appropriate. So I would like to myself apologize for allowing that to continue.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'll add into that also, since I run the meeting, there's a statement that I try to read. Sometimes I forget to do that. And I want to actually do that more, obviously, to make sure that people are aware of how to conduct themselves when they do that. I don't, and I kind of preface that, I don't want to have banter back and forth between residents and us calling us out directly or whatever. We do encourage public participation. I try to be a little lenient and facilitate that. And so, a lot of the onus is on the speakers up there. I don't want to have to gavel people out all the time either. Just as a general rule, if everybody, when you do make comments, obviously keep them professional. Try not to attack individuals or whatever. I want to give you your time to speak, but we don't want to turn into a shouting match. So I appreciate your comments.
And I totally agree with that. I think everybody has their own opinion, and that is just what it is, opinion. We can't criticize each other, right or wrong. That's not what this is for. And I'm sorry you went that way. It was an embarrassing moment, and hopefully we don't see that again or have that occur at this council.
Thanks. Any other comments? Dave?
Could I ask, how does it sound out there? Does it sound muffled or bad or what? Good?
Better.
Better?
Much better.
Okay. I'm wondering if the volume could be turned down just a little
It
bit.
is echoing a little bit. Yeah.
So that we don't have that echo up here. It's very annoying. Is that better?
You all still here? Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Okay. Moving on to council business. The only item we have tonight is number one, discussion of ordinance number 24-696, amending section 127-58 of Article 3 of Chapter 127 of the City of Port Richey Code of Ordinances to allow for recreational vehicle parks in a planned unit development zoning district. I'll pass it to Mr. Coppler for introduction.
Thank you very much. So we have I've put together a PowerPoint. This is a joint project between the city attorney and myself. So we'll be tag teaming a lot on as we go through this. But there's a couple parts to this presentation before I start. The first part is kind of bring bring back some of the questions that was asked during the discussion to make sure that you see the answer to some of the questions that was brought up either by the public or yourselves. There's only a couple things there. And then we're going to go in and go through each section and talk about what each section says, get an understanding before we move on that this sounds good, doesn't sound good, we want to change it this way. And doing that, if we want to go forward, it's going to help expedite bringing it forward. It's not going to take a fence code amount of time, which is a new thing that I want to kind of say that that's a length of time, fence code.
Infinite.
Yes. Everyone will know it's 9 months, right? But anyhow, so we'll get started with this. And so the first thing, there was a conversation that came up about the, this would work. Of course, I have to hit the right button. About the zoning code. And I believe Councilman Kinsella had asked about the zoning code. It'd been good to have that. He's right. A couple things I want to bring up about this is that this particular zoning code or zoning map was done in 2011. So it's a little bit old. It hasn't been updated since then, and we are now in the process to get this updated. But I'm pretty sure right now that the areas that we were talking about for the A1 is in fact A1. And so there's actually two different areas that are A1. So the green area is the A1 color, and that is the area that Mr. Todd's property is and where they're looking to do a development there. The lower green, which is the only other agricultural, is actually owned by the city. So our well field's down there and we own some of the surroundings. So I'm pretty sure that we don't have to worry about a RV park happening there. So we'd only be concerned about the area there to the upper right for development related to A1. And so I also have the board there as we go through this presentation. We don't go back to this. You can visualize it there as well.
Thank you.
Yep. The next issue that was brought up, and actually when the resident was talking about it, you know, I was sitting there listening to what he was saying, and I'm thinking, yeah, why didn't we think about that? And this relates to where the RV park allowances within the A1 amendment that we did. And you can recall to the left of this slide is where it's at right now, which is under the permitted principal uses. And the resident had brought up that, well, you know, his thoughts was it should be under this special exception use, because then it would have to go to the Board of Adjustment, and going to the Board of Adjustment would require more public hearings with that. And, you know, as he was talking, I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I mean, why not err on the side of more public input than less public input? It made sense. And so the next day, when Nancy, the city attorney, and I were talking about this, we were trying to understand why we didn't think about that. It's like, why didn't we think about that? But looking at it, I guess we kind of had an understanding that going through the PUD process was going to be a public process. But it wasn't until we looked at it again to understand how. I knew that it was going to come to a public hearing for council. What I guess I didn't know was there's actually two public hearings for the PUD. The first one is through planning and zoning, and then after they recommend it on to council, you would have to have a public hearing as well. So in effect, you're getting those two public hearings for the public. And when you read the PUD, if you had a chance to read that section in what we're changing, you know, it says that you have to go through the same public hearing process that you do for a rezoning. And so we're going to be notifying, you know, all the surrounding property owners so they would know not only in planning, but also for the city council process for the approval. So again, we wanted to make sure that you know, you understood that there is going to be a couple different points where the public can come in and say what they think about, you know, any proposed PUD development. It doesn't need to go through that special exception. At least from our perspective, we don't need to go through that special exception provision. So if there's any questions, comments on that, again, I think erring on the side of public input is a good thing to do. So you could do that, but understand if you put it in special exceptions, you're just going to have 3 instead of 2. Not bad, but is it a practice you want to get into? I don't know. That's left up to you to decide that. And so this slide just basically goes into that and shows that you're going to have 2 public hearings. So I won't dwell on that one. So now we'll get on to the discussion about the PUD. So the first thing I wanted everyone to be clear on and understand is, as we internally talked about where to put all these requirements for an RV park, what we ultimately decided was we wanted to put it actually within the PUD code. And so in understanding that, the amendment ordinance that you have is a lot longer than just creating a new section, because we're amending the code and we're putting it in as, I can't read it from here, as M, I believe, or is that right? M, yes, in there. And so this slide just shows you that, you have the PUD and then we're inserting at a point the code for the RV parks in the PUD. And so it's interfaces, I guess you'd say, with the existing PUD code. There are some differences, and again, that's why we wanted to spell out one difference, for example, and I don't know if it's actually the next slide, is not the next slide, but we'll get to it and I'll point that out. But the first part, which is M, recreational vehicle parks in PUD districts, the first section is the purpose and intent. So we just wanted to spell out why we're doing a recreational vehicle park in the PUD district. The entire recreational park shall be designed and laid out in a detailed master plan. The land which is developed shall be under a unified control and shall be plan developed as a whole. So what this is speaking about is we want to make sure that we don't have someone coming in wanting to do this 30-acre PUD, but they only own 15 acres, right? It's only going to be on the acres it's controlled. So control could be you own it, you could have it under a contract that is clear cut that that's what it's going to be. I don't know if there's any other elements of control that you could have outside of those two, but those are the 2 primary ways that they would have to indicate to us. And actually, if you go through the PUD process, what they have to submit to us is evidence that either they own it or they have it under their control. So this, you could say, is redundant, but I think we wanted to be very clear that we want to make sure that these things are within the plan that we're going to get as we go to the RV park. And then the last piece 3 here, these standards are not intended to be all-inclusive. Alternate designs may be considered that meet the intent of well-organized recreational vehicle parks. And I think, and I'm going to ask Nancy on this one, maybe to speak a little bit. As we go through the rules and the regulations we have here, the benefit of a PUD is that they can provide an alternative to what these codes are. And it fits within the council, and
Right.
I've started, you finish.
Yeah, the PUD kind of provides the framework, but that necessarily someone that wants to undergo a process to have a recreational vehicle park as a PUD has to hit every single one of those things exactly as worded. There's work that can be done. Let's say we say you have to have a maximum of 10 trees. They may want 6 trees. Maybe we're okay with 6 trees. So there's work that can be done, and it's not it must fit. It's not a square into a square hole kind of thing. It can be worked together and work to get to the end, as long as it meets the intent of what's trying to be provided here.
So what is the process for getting 6 trees instead of 10?
It would be them providing everything that's required for the codes, bringing it to the city working with them, talking with them,
The normal,
Going- yep.
the normal process
Yep.
to get approval and then it comes, okay.
Right, like any
That's
other
what I was
PUD,
saying.
yeah, any other PUD process, this is just gonna, the only difference, I mean, there are some different requirements for this as we're gonna go through. But if you've ever seen the process for a planned unit development, this is the same, it's just gonna be for RV parks.
Now, those changes, are those go through the Board of Adjustment as variances and whatnot, or is it separate? to that?
Well, no, the framework's gonna be whatever ordinance you may draft, pass, and you're gonna keep within that framework. So it's really gonna be back and forth with the city and then city meaning city staff, and then it's gonna come to you guys. Well, it's gonna go planning and zoning, and it's gonna come to you guys. There's gonna be two public hearings ultimately to seek approval. So it's gonna go through that process. It wouldn't necessarily be a variance from what you have, within the process that, again, a maximum of 10 trees doesn't mean you have to have 10 trees. We can work together. And that's not a good example, but that's the first one that came to my mind. So we're going to hear that a lot, I promise you. But that will be through the process, first with the city, going back and forth with the city staff, then planning and zoning, and then ultimately you guys.
In generally, in using the tree as an example, during the early part, so they bring in the plan and we're going through it as staff, and they say, you're supposed to have 10 trees, but you only have to have a 5-inch caliper tree, right? But all of our trees are 10-inch caliper. So we would like, rather than have 10, we want 8. And you look at that and say, well, the lot coverage is about the same. And
Yeah,
all
it
the
meets the
things about-
intent of the idea behind the PUD process.
And so we would then, put that forward as part of their plan. They would go through planning. Planning would look at that and say, yeah, we want 10. And so to get through planning, they would have, okay, we'll agree to put 10 in there. And then it could come here and, they could make that case to you and say, listen, we wanted 8, and here's why we wanted 8. They want 10, but we'd rather have 8. And it's something that you could then say, okay, yeah, we understand 8.
So we can, the planning and zoning is a suggestion, but we have the ability to change that suggestion.
Yes. Yeah. Ultimately, you as council have that final say in what it looks like. Now, again, you don't want to go back and say, we don't want any trees, right? I mean, you want, because the spirit of this is to have trees. So you need to at least stay within the spirit.
So it sounds very exhausting and time consuming. Is there some way that we could streamline this, that if it says have to have a maximum of 10 trees, if up to 10 trees as opposed to 10 trees, and that way if they want 5, they fall in that bracket?
So
I'm just
yeah,
wondering. I mean, it just sounds
where the this analogy breaks down is in the details.
Yeah.
Because we have, as we may see later on if you ask, we have a code that details exactly what type of trees, how big, all this type of thing, and so it would be handled there. And again, I think what we would probably try to do is within the bounds that we as staff, understand what your goals are, what planning's goals are, try to, make those adjustments already. So when it gets there, it's something that we know is pretty acceptable to begin with. And so we use that story that planning has one idea, you may have a different one. What our goal is, it be the same. So there isn't that type of difference. There may be things that we don't think are reasonable, and we'd be able to tell you that. So it sounds very exhausting and time consuming, but the reality is by the time it gets to planning and gets to you, there's probably not going to be a lot of issues you have to think through like that.
Yeah, but it's still going to be quite time consuming for the, that owner, trying to go through the process. Again, using the trees, if we change this, it said they must have between 5 to 10 trees.
Mm-hmm.
So anything in between, we don't care, as long as it's between 5 and 10, as opposed to 10. And then if they want 8, coming back here or to planning and going through the whole process. I mean, it's time consuming.
And
I think that will be answered as we go through this.
Okay.
When we see those different areas, and maybe there's somewhere it says the maximum of 10, and we can talk about, do we really want to say that? Do we want to say 5 to 10? Do we want to wordsmith it differently? So you're going to see some of these, probably quite a few of them, refer to some other code provision within the city. Like, and again, trees, bad example, because there is provision about trees and what you can and can't do with trees. So some of the statements within this proposed wording will take you to some other code provision that will give you more definitive information. And I will say, and I'm sure Matt will agree, the person bringing this to you wants it approved. They're going to do everything they can with staff ahead of time to find out what that means, and they'll have the outline from your PUD ordinance of the things that you're looking for, and they don't want to bring a project forward for you to go no. So there will be some work, but they usually hire professionals, as we've seen, as they come here and have helped with this process, that tell them this is what the city code wants, this is how you can propose it to meet those requirements to help facilitate that process.
So is there any other questions on the purpose and intent? I mean, again, we're just trying to make sure everyone knows why we're doing what we're doing, what it's supposed to entail. Good. So no changes? So then the next section is the I can't say that word.
Applicability.
Thank you. So this says these standards shall apply to all new recreational vehicle parks. We don't have any new, so obviously, or don't have any existing, so obviously new. Review and compliance with standards section shall be considered subject to the submittal requirements for PUD of this land development code. And so again, we're just referencing back to say that this process is part of the PUD, and everything that the PUD requires you to submit to us, you have to submit. And again, there are some things that may be applicable to this, but there may be other parts that aren't. Because again, if you consider what a PUD covers, a PUD could cover a very large residential condominium development that's going to have a different impact on the city that requires traffic analysis and maybe some environmental analysis, where a recreational park being in a more agricultural area may not require those things. So there's some things that may be required, some things may not be required, but it's going to go based on what the PUD requirements are for that type of use. Shall only be permitted where allowed by PUD classification, shall not be permitted in any area found unsuitable for such development because of poor, undesirable drainage, physical topography, soil characteristics, public access, or other features harmful to the public health. And this is kind of a general statement that you see in a lot of code that says you as council or the decision-making body has to take in a lot of different, input into a decision to grant a PUD or not. Again, kind of boilerplate language you would see in this. Compliance, development of the recreational vehicle park shall be in conformance with the binding PUD master plan is finally approved and filed with the city. Any development use or density which fails to substantially conform shall constitute a violation of this section, as well as other applicable city ordinances as may pertain. So this is the warning to the developer that we're granting, this development based upon what we've agreed to, you've agreed to, cities agreed to, and you better follow it. Because, if we say, for instance, you're only allowed to have 8 sites per acre, and, when it's built out, we find 10 sites per acre, well, you only get 8 sites. You can't have 10. And you can't say, well, what's built? No, it's 8, it's not 10. And then the last section E there, the PUD master plan may be subject to conditions of approval as determined by the city council. And so this basically says that there may be other things that council may require that is not contained within this code that is going to be subject to that. And an example, the one that came to mind first, I guess I'll use, is there's going to be a document that's signed between the RV park and the person renting the space. You may want to see that. And so you may put a condition in there that this is going to be approved, conditional upon us seeing whatever that document looks like. And there may be other things that again, it could come up through the land use process as we go through that isn't contained within this code or any of the city codes that you might think is a very important aspect to address and make sure it's part of the approval. And usually on the site plan, if you've seen site plans before that are approved, there's a list of conditions. Again, that may be different than what the code says is there. And again, if you say that use density, that in this particular case, because it's very large, and we want to allow 10 instead of 8 sites per acre, that may be a condition for approval. Or in another context, if the site isn't as vast, and you say normally it's 8, but because of the tightness of this, we're only going to allow 6. That's the only way we'll approve this plan. Then that could be a condition for approval. So again, it just gives you that ability to put some other restrictions or requests within the approval of the PUD.
So on that C up there, where shall not be permitted in an area found unsuitable for such development because of poor, undesirable drainage, who determines that? I mean, none of us up here have any of that knowledge or education. I'm not sure if our building department is capable of doing that. I mean, here's something, who has that say so, that's undesirable?
So the ultimate arbitrator of that is council. I mean, you'll ultimately make that decision. You won't make that decision in the vacuum, though. I mean, I think if we have a concern as staff that I'm trying to think, there's a soil type that is all wetland, and it's deemed to be wetland, and they want to put all the development on a type of soil that is considered to be a wetland soil. First off, that probably wouldn't make it through Swift Mud, right, when they review it. But we probably, would be able to flag that and saying, listen, first off, we need an engineer to review that to make sure that this, what they're looking to do can be done on that. And that sometimes comes out when you're doing buildings more than just the site prep, where we would say, listen, you need to provide us engineering review that you can put that piling in that area and get it to a solid bedrock. And so they would have to provide engineering that would detail how what they're doing would meet and make it a suitable use on that type of soil. So you would arbitrate that, I guess, to a certain degree, based upon specific information provided by experts saying that this is either doable or it isn't doable. And potentially you could have, the developer saying, this is what our engineer says. You could have, the city's engineer saying, well, this is what we believe. And you may have to make a decision based upon that.
Makes sense.
Just thinking forward, obviously we don't have any recreational vehicle park code now. Let's say that we were to annex one in, that wouldn't fall into it's existing, so it wouldn't be new in that case. I'm assuming it's probably a grandfather type scenario, whatever. We wouldn't have any code to police that at that point, right? Or
That's a good point. It wouldn't, the grandfather is another term that we all kind of commonly use for legal nonconforming use. A legal nonconforming use is a use that within your code was legal. You changed your code to make it not legal. So if it's property that was never yours, that kind of makes that analysis a little bit different. So you may, if you think there is a possibility of obtaining more land where this could be an issue, you may want to wordsmith and not put new.
all right, that's kind of what I was thinking.
In case you obtain an existing one. But other side of that, if you obtain an existing one, they're not going to start over, right? They're not going to knock down and start over. So that you may want to leave this as new.
So let me
Yes.
jump in there. So So thinking about that, the odds that we're going to be annexing agriculturally zoned land with a RV park is very slim. So let's say we annex a piece of property, we're going to zone it based upon what our land use plan is, right? So if some of the areas that are close to this building that are not sit in the city, if we annex them in, it wouldn't be an A1, right? It's going to be, light industrial, or it's going to be a commercial. And so right now, the only place you can put an RV park is in an A1. So when that comes into the city, it's right away going to be a non-conforming use, right? But we can't do anything about it. That's where the thought of grandfathering comes in. Is it's a use that's allowed, but it's not conforming to that. So if they came in and said, well, hey, we want to expand this, there's no way that they could expand it because it's not conforming in that district. And so what would be, I think the elements of, making sure that they do what we want them to do in theirs is a different issue altogether. This is development standards. This isn't, holding them, related to zoning to, these aspects of, whether they have 8 per acre or 10 per acre, they'll have whatever they have. Mm-hmm. And we can't enforce that any differently than anything else. I mean, it's just, that's what they have. And it would only be an issue when they try to develop it either differently or expand it or what, then it would fall under these provisions. And the first part of that is, unless they're A1, they're not expanding it. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. So to police that in a different way, you would have to have a different section of the code that talks about RV parks, and we want to make sure that they perform the way that they should perform. Mm. That would be applicable to any RV park in the city. So not a land use issue. It's more of a code enforcement issue. Mm-hmm. Right. Any changes? Good. So then we get into the standards part. So the first one is minimum lot requirements that are set forth in section 127-5080, which I've provided you the language. This is an interesting section because it kind of switches from minimum to maximum in different areas. Another possibly confusing part of this is it also gets into the maximum residential density, which we allow per acre. And you should probably pick up really quick that says 18, and in the RV park we talk about 8. And so they're apples and oranges, really, because the 18 is talking about dwelling units per acre. The thought probably was never about RVs when this was constructed. It was about, housing units. So it is different, and we recognize that. There's a lot of redundancy as well in this, that if you told us to clean it up, I don't think we would be too scared to do that.
I think it needs some work.
Yeah.
You don't usually have a maximum density thrown in the middle of a section called minimum lot requirements, since it's a maximum density requirement. But I think you want to address that.
Yeah, we have the field that we have to play with.
Yep.
But the important part of this really is that first sentence of a PUD zoning district shall include no less than 5 acres of contiguous land and shall be of such proportions as to properly accommodate all proposed uses in keeping with the general requirements of the city and established policies and objectives of the comprehensive plan. That's the key sentence that you have to keep in mind with this. And the rest of it, again, is a little bit redundant. It kind of goes back on itself and reiterates that, and then it gets into the maximum residential density, which again is different, and we spell it out differently within the code for RV parks. The other piece is though, minimum of 20% of the total site area, less any areas devoted exclusively to non-residential uses shall be devoted to common open space and recreational areas. So there's another section in here. It kind of goes back to what this talks about in terms of open space, that it needs to be 20%. So those are the two pieces of minimum requirements that you really have to keep in mind as we go through the process.
I would ask that you clean that up.
Thank you.
Can do that. And Matt and I talked this morning, and obviously right now, the proposed language for 3A just says minimum lot requirements is set forth in 12758E.
Mhm.
Since right now, 12758E is not the clearest piece of writing, we could just specifically say in 3A, minimum lot requirements, and include the two provisions Matt just pointed out, since the other provisions really don't apply, because later in the ordinance it talks about density and other things like that. So we could the whole options. You could leave it the way it is, minimum lot requirements set forth in section 127-58E. We could rewrite it for minimum lot requirements and pointing out the no less than 5 acres provision and the minimum 20% of total site area provision, and get rid of the rest of it. Or what was my third option? There's a third option in my head, but now I've lost it. Leave it or change it. Those are the two things.
Well,
There's only two options.
This here is general PUD language.
Yes.
This doesn't have nothing to do with the actual RV park.
No, but what the initial intent of including it was, you want the idea was to retain the first provision about no less than 5 acres.
Mhm.
And then that last provision of a minimum of 20%, retaining those as requirements within the RV PUD.
Mhm.
But yes.
Right.
So the other part really is not applicable here. So it might be cleaner just for the RV PUD to clearly state that.
I'll spell that out there.
Yes.
So
Right.
Instead of referencing.
Yes, instead of referencing it back to something that ultimately we're going to change, we could just spell it out here, that under the RV PUD, we want minimum lot requirements to be 5 acre, no less than 5 acres, and the 20% of total site area, that last provision, and get rid of the rest of it. And then separately, we can fix that provision for the other PUDs.
I think that answers one of Tom's questions before. Keep it simple for people. Let's not make it confusing and difficult for them to do things. So let's keep it simple and clean it up.
Well, and I'm wondering, by doing that, are you creating like a spaghetti type code scenario where we're calling it out in RV park, but this is in general PUD? Maybe it should be actually fixed at that level, so we don't have to.
Well, I think that's the idea, is we're going to fix both ultimately, so we can put the specific requirements that we want to keep in the RV PUD section, and this 12758E is from the general PUD language in your code, and we're going to clean that up to make it more understandable.
And so
So
at that point, you would just be repeating it in the RV one.
you would, unless we decide
A good example, let's say that down the road, we want to loosen that up. It's not 5 acres is minimum, it's 4.
Right, you'd be
Right.
changing it in two places.
Right.
Right.
I
But
guess that's a concern I have.
And the other part of that, though, is the provision for non-RV PUD. You have the maximum density that needs to be addressed for that provision, which may end up being the same, may not. So I think as we go, we can kind of, if as you talk about the RV PUD, if you,
Within RV, you shouldn't have anything different from the overall standard unless you're deviating from that. That's my point.
well, the overall PUD has certain requirements unrelated to RVs, and we're making a new section for RVs that do have some different standards. So they're going to be different. Now, you may ultimately determine density is going to be the same, so that might be the same number, and that may allow us to
Well, density's a perfect.
Right.
It says
Yeah.
8 now. It's
Right.
18 here.
So if we change, let's
more
say,
restrictive.
after this conversation's over, it's determined that you want to move forward with the RV PUD and you want to put 18 as the maximum density for the RV PUD, as well as leaving it for the non-RV PUD, then maybe we can leave it as within the RV PUD, just to refer back to the other section, and we just clean the other section up. So they're going to be exactly the same. You don't need to state them. I agree with that. Right now, they're a little bit different. So maybe that question can be better answered once we get through this and see what decisions you guys make with the other language. I hope that kind of.
Yeah, I don't want down the road as we have more PUDs or whatever, that they just restate
Right.
what the general thing is. We should be able to, in fact, have it here, hey, refer to this
Right.
section. It's 20%, it's these things. Or if you repeat it there, then you got to change, obviously it's work to change stuff, right? So
Right.
we better get it right first
So I
time.
think at this point, not knowing what your decision will be regarding an RVPUD maximum density, we can't answer that question if we need to have it stated in both places, because right now it is different as proposed.
Okay.
So,
And just to muddy the water even more, I'm going to make a prediction that we're probably going to be revisiting the PUD code anyways as we go through the comprehensive land use plan update. I'm going to guess that there's going to need to be changes to the PUD if the public wants to increase density, for instance, we're going to have to revisit the PUD. And so that's why I think, when Nancy's suggesting maybe we make the change to clarify it within the standards for the RV park is better, because I know we're going to go back and change that. And when we go back, or if we go back and change, say, we're probably going to separate out that density from that section anyways and create another section for density. So
Makes sense.
to make a change in now would mean we'd be going back and changing it again, which may contradict what you have for this. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
So we're clear, we're gonna make this specifically to those two sections in 17258E regarding the size, the acres of contiguous land, and then the 20% of total site for open space.
Yeah, this is gonna be just for the RV parks.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Oh, this is my favorite site. Maximum density and layout. So recreational vehicle parks shall have a maximum density of 8 recreational vehicle spaces per gross acre. The number of recreational vehicle units does not confer any vested residential development rights whatsoever. Now, that last sentence is important based upon what our code says. Now, we stole this language from Crystal River, and they had, the language is identical, and their density for the number of RV spaces is identical to their residential density. And so what they wanted to make sure of is that people are not going to make that conversion that, an RV space is a residential space, right? So they put that language in there to say, listen, this is only for recreational vehicle units, not residential units. And so again, that's why I'm not that concerned about that language in the section we just talked about for the density, because we've just, in this section, kind of clarified that they're two different things. That's talking about residential. This is talking about recreational vehicle units. And I know we kind of have this conversation, what is the right density? Should it be 8? Should it be 18? Should it be 156? What is that right number? And so what I did was I kind of went out there and found a few RV parks to kind of give you what that density looks like. And now understand these are all different sizes. So it's going to look differently, but just understand that they're all different sizes. So if you want to hit the first one, Ashley. So this first one here is the Suncoast RV Park. And it should be very familiar because it's just outside the city limits on US 19. And so the caveat to this information is this is what's readily available. So if it's not correct, don't hold me accountable for that. But this allegedly has 165 RV sites. It's 8.96 acres. And so that works out to whatever that number is there. 18 per acre. And so now what you have to think of, and I placed at your desk, I think is the the 1-page sheet At the top, it says Pasco County, Florida Land Development Code, travel trailer, recreational parks and campgrounds. And so I don't know the timing of this. I'm only assuming that this was either developed under these standards or some standards that the county had. So I just wanted to give you what the county requires for their RV parks, which you can see is not as spelled out as what ours would be in this. But again, the important part is, so this kind of gives you that density of what 18 per acre would look like. So then, oh,
I went to the next one.
no, I didn't want to though, because you messed up the whole thing.
Sorry.
Now click on the next one. So this one is Crystal Isles, which is in Crystal Rivers. I don't believe this is the one that was the result or resulted after they adopted the new code. But interesting enough, it kind of looks like it complies with what their code is, so it may have been. But this one is 254 sites in 32.44 acres and approximately 8 sites per acre. And so when you kind of look at it, it's not that dramatically different than what I just showed you here in the Port Richey area. But you can tell that it is a little bit spaced out a little more in between each of the different sites. Then let's go back to the next one. So I'll show you the propaganda that they put out. So this is Orange Lake RV Resort in Citra, Florida. And so this is kind of the layout that they show that they're building. I don't know if all the phases have been built on this, and the next one I'm going to show you is, oops, now see, I just did it. Okay, now click on the next one. So this is the aerial of that. Looks like this one, whenever Google Earth did this, they're still in construction. But even with that case, you can kind of see how it's going to lay out with each of those slanty areas there. On the right side is where the trailer spaces are going, or the RV spaces are going to be.
I just want you to notice there's a worm farm.
There's what?
There's a worm farm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it says worm farm.
Oh, somewhere along there is one, yes.
Yeah, just thought I'd point that out.
So this one didn't have the total area on it, unfortunately, but it's somewhere I had it's if I'm not mistaken, this one is 140 acres in total.
Because it was like 3.5
Yeah,
per acre,
so
it has to be humongous.
yeah.
Property.
So it ends up being like 3.5, I think, or three per acre is what it comes out to be. Or no, it's the next one is that. This I think was like 4 or 5 maybe per acre it came out, but it's pretty large. And then the last one, yep, that one. Yeah, let's do the propaganda first. So this is Nature's Resort. Again, not too far from here. And go back and show you the aerial of this one. Click on the last one. Thank you. So this one is 297 sites over 97 acres, and that works out to about 3 sites per acre. But the reality is, it's probably 297 sites over about 40 acres. They own a lot of the land surrounding where the development or the developed sites are, so they're able to include that as their acreage.
There are a lot of wetlands there that aren't buildable,
I bet so.
so that adds to the value.
Yeah. I mean, I would guess that's the case. Just looking at, especially if you look to the kind of the left side there, a lot of that's probably going to be wetland. But yeah, the point of these really is just to give you a sense of density. So when we're speaking about 8, 18, 20, or whatever, it kind of tells you what you can expect. And again, any developments, you know, if you look at all the developments are different, and so you have no idea what's going to be coming into you. They're going to look different, but you can kind of feel how the density numbers are.
Well, it's really relative to what the acreage is.
Yeah.
You know, you have lakes, you have wetlands.
And so it's gonna, I mean, like, if you have a lake or a river or something like that, that's included in the acreage, and it pushes it into be more dense.
Right.
So, I mean, if it was all flat land, it would be more space between it. So it's, I get that.
Then before we begin discussion on that, I just wanted to go over the second part of that, which is as park models known as park trailers defined as set forth in section 320.011B7. Florida statutes are expressly prohibited. So you may wonder what that definition is. You could click on that bottom one there.
I like pictures. This is good. Thanks.
Yeah. So I give you what that definition is from the state statute. But what you can see is the difference between this and an RV or a fifth wheel really is the way that you know these come on a trailer and they're generally dropped off. Where an RV comes with wheels attached, you don't drop the wheels off. And a fifth wheel attached, you don't drop the wheels off. That really is the big difference, is the ability to take it off of the trailer and set it down onto the ground and leave it there for a period of time.
So it's like a tiny home.
That's another name for it, yeah. I mean,
This is like what goes into a mobile home park as opposed to an RV park.
yeah.
And the picture on the right is not a park trailer. That's a regular RV. That's a park trailer.
That's a park trailer.
What he's
If
saying is you can take the wheels off.
If you
It's on a trailer.
look very closely at that one, and the only reason I know that this is in fact one, although it may not look like it, is the story that goes along with it about it being stolen and all that, but it's another story. If you look very closely at it, you can see it's a trailer that it's sitting on, not
Not part of it.
Yeah.
Not part of the
yeah, it's
chassis.
not it's not part of the chassis.
It kind of looks from a distance. It looks like one.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, it's, I think all part of the story with that one is it was stolen, and they couldn't figure out how it was stolen, how they got it out and put it on the trailer and all that without someone seeing it. But again, I think the reason that you would not allow these is that the expectation of an RV park is that it's a transient housing, and they're not going to be there for a lengthy time. Now, well, I won't go any further than that. I don't know if you want to talk about that piece or go back to the density, but they're both there, and I know we need to have this hashed out to be able to go on to the next piece.
Okay. So as I stated before, on a density, 8 seems a little anemic to me. I think we could expand that.
I did a little investigating on that myself. Motor home park, mobile home park, they require 5,000 square foot per unit. That's about 8 per acre, if you just do the math. But that's a different size deal than what these trailers are. They need, or these motorhomes are, and they need to be able to negotiate the turns and drive through there. They're long vehicles. They're 45 feet. If you drive it, they're 8.5 feet wide. But if you look at just the math on that, just allow for, side things that roll out.
Hit your button.
Thank you.
Sorry. The side panels that roll out, you're gonna need some side, space on there. But, you know, if you look at 1,500 square foot as opposed to 5,000 square foot, and I was just doing some round numbers here. You know, you could end up in the 18 to 20 space pretty easy and not really have that feel like that's density. I think you had an 18 as an example up there, which was real similar, I believe. But I think, you know, if you compare 8 per acre on a mobile home park versus 8 per acre on a RV park, there is a big discrepancy there, and I think you could actually handle a little more capacity in there because, you know, you're allowing for all that other stuff. These things have to negotiate the turns. They're long vehicles, especially if you got an RV towing, a tow behind Jeep or something like that. A lot of them do that. So I'd be inclined to move that number up a little bit.
Yeah, I think what I'd read is it's kind of the standard range is 10 to 15 is what it's kind of the sweet spot.
So when this was originally written by the city, what was the purpose of having 8?
So,
That was a regular density, right? For the
so in talking with Crystal River about that, they kind of went through the same struggle that we went through, is what is the right density? And like us, they looked around at what all the different codes out there, so, you know, our model codes would have. And it ranges, right, all over the place. And they wanted, like, you know, us to a certain degree, wanted a number that they could go back on and say, this is why we chose this. And in their PUD, the density is 8 residential units per acre. And so again, that goes back to why it said earlier that, you know, because those numbers were the same, but there are 2 different meanings behind them, they put this doesn't confer any residential development rights. So they ended up choosing what was already the density for residential housing to be able to tie back to it. We looked at, I thought about it, you know, again, I put 8 in as a placeholder because I didn't know where you guys would end up. I didn't think that, you know, going any smaller would make much sense because then you really wouldn't probably have the density for it to be worth developing. But I didn't know what the right number would be. With that being said, let me say there is another law out there though that does say what the maximum density is. And that's in the bigger one that has chapter 64E-15 Florida Administrative Code, mobile home lodging, recreational vehicle parks. If you go to the second page towards the middle, this would be 2B3, recreational vehicle parks, where it says the density shall not exceed 25 recreational vehicle units per acre of gross site. So the maximum that would be allowed, I mean, you could say I want 50 on there, but related to the state code, that would not go over. And ultimately, this is going to have to go through the review by the health department, and this is what the health department would be going by. So your range is anywhere from 0 to 25 and not over that. And again, the pictures that I put in there, I wanted you to kind of feel what the different densities look like. So you could understand what 8 looks like and what, you know, more look like.
The density is for, I think the proper word is gross acreage.
Correct.
Irrespective of what's on that acreage. Lakes, rivers, swampland, you know, mangroves.
Worm farms.
I'm sorry?
Worm farms.
Worm farms, thank you. I didn't know you needed a farm for a worm. Okay, you learn something every day. All right, anyway, go back. So the density,
It's A1.
what?
It's A1.
You could have wind farms.
Agricultural.
So you could have 50 acres of land and only have 10 acres of usable property, and they can put, if we do the 18, as you had suggested, they're going to be on top of one another with slides, and our police or fire are not going to be able to.
I didn't suggest 18.
But what?
18 is what we have in our code now for residential, right?
Residential.
Yeah.
Okay.
And remember, there's also, if we're gonna get to their setback requirements, there's other
Okay.
requirements that they're gonna have to still adhere to.
I see.
So
Okay.
that can help them not be on top of
So that's, it's kind of like hard to say units because of each, well, we only have the two areas that are A1, and I understand that, but if we should acquire new land, this code is being written for the general purpose. So it's kind of hard.
It's very hard to put a number in there because depending on the layout and all that, you could end up with a mess. So a follow-up question to that. So let's say we make it 18. Just keep it the same, kind of like Chris River today. If we make it 18, and this particular A1 property, like I said, it has 5 acres and 4 acres in a lake, so we're talking about 1 acre.
Mhm.
So they're going to put 18 times 5, whatever that is. It's going to be very compact. When we see that site plan, at that point, if they're within the restrictions of the PUD, they have the 18 based on the layout and whatnot. But we look at that as, man, if they're on top of each other, do we have the ability to say, no, we don't like that density because it's the way that the land is?
Well, isn't the master plan gonna address that?
I think that's what he's asking. If our code says you can have a maximum density of 18 vehicles per gross acre, you know, they come to us and the way their land is configured, they're on top of each other and you don't care for it, right? Can you do something with that?
Because we don't have to approve the
Let me,
development, right?
Can I ask another question on this piece of paper that you gave us, Matt, regarding what you just said, 3 dash whatever?
Yep.
Recreational vehicle parks, the minimum size and location of each recreational vehicle space constructed or developed after the effective date shall be A. It says each recreational vehicle space shall contain a minimum of 1,200 square feet. Instead of putting a maximum number of vehicles per acre, I might say, can we put that as the
A minimum
requirement?
footprint.
A minimum number of square feet per space.
I actually like that idea better than saying, okay, we're gonna allow 12 units on here, but there's 3 rivers in the property, and then, oh, now they're all on top. I mean, I'm big on RVing, and I love, sites that have ample space.
Well, and to that example, both of you, I did the math on that too. And if you do look at it per acre, I use 1,300, which is real close to this number, and that's 33 per acre. But the master plan, once they lay it out and they go, okay, you got 20 acres and 5 of it is of water that you can't build on, and then maybe you have some other stuff. Ultimately, it dials it back by default, doesn't it? If we settle on a number and then that number is used to try to site plan, that's what the next step would be, is the owner would try to basically lay out a plan.
All those plans don't come to us for, the Washington Street, those things changed, those plans changed and that did not come to council.
Right.
It went by whatever was written.
But if we write something here that's a guideline, and then that guideline is used for the engineer, the planner, the civil guy, come out, lay out the site, he comes to our building code and say, hey, this isn't really gonna work. They're gonna have restraints automatically because it's not gonna handle the flow of the roads and the curves and the unusable space on the ground. Does it allow us to focus on what that number is and just pick a number? Ultimately, it's going to be less than that because the default is the master plan is going to kind of limit the factors of what they can or cannot build.
So I'm breaking one of my rules that I I had in my mind tonight, which is I'm not going from a slide until we all agree what that slide says, but I just want to go forward real quick. And it's to this slide here where it talks about the dimensional standards. So that's what you're bringing up is the dimensional standards. And so the way that that was kind of handled in this is each recreational vehicle space shall be a minimum width and depth to accommodate both recreational vehicle unit and the tow vehicle. And so it was then you have the side setbacks that kind of overlay that. And so the intention there is so the developer can come in with a plan that you can look at and say, yep, that meets the characteristics of what we expect without saying specifically it has to be 1,200 feet. Maybe 1,150 feet's better than 1,200 feet, or 1,300 feet's better than 1,000 feet. And so it allows the developer to come in, make what they want, and you can say, no, that's not going to work. But understand that these are actually two different concepts, because you could have a large enough space that you could have 1,300 square feet and still have 20 units per acre, right? So that's why you got to look at the dimensional space differently from the maximum density. What you could, if you just say, well, you can have as many unit spaces as you want, as long as you only have 1,200 square foot of unit space, and that could work out to be again up to the max 25, and you may not want that. So there are two different issues to get into.
So going back to my question on let's say we get a site plan, and before you answer that, I don't like the metric here for obvious reasons, right? It could be a 5-acre tract, it could be all 5 acres are developable, and they're spread out well, or they're compacted based on there's only 4 acres that are, or 1 acre is usable. So it's not, it doesn't make sense to.
And that, I was going to interrupt you as you're all talking. It seems to me that part of the issue is the way it's written, saying gross acreage, because obviously that's a way to measure it. You know exactly what the property is, but the part of the issue with how many, for your density question is, well, what's that going to mean depending on the lot? Is it going to, is there some other term that would encompass? I'm sitting here, I can't think of a way to do it. If it's all developable,
It's hard.
That word.
if there's no lakes and it's all buildable. Thank you. Is it one metric? If it's, has the pond or a lake, or there's wetlands that make it not all developable. I can't even say that. You can't build it. You can't build on all of it. Is there a different metric? And sitting here and I can't craft perfect language to tell you, but that might be something to think about too, to kind of give you may not like that idea, but
I'm thinking later on in the section, where we talk about the open space requirement. So if you get into, you would subtract out of the developable land that space as well.
Yeah.
So it creates potentially,
a two-step process where you take the total, back out the non-buildable, now you have the remaining buildable, and then subtract the green space and roads, then you've got what's, where you can park. You're right.
So
maybe we can put, and I'll have to probably do some research on this idea that just popped in my head. Some more limiting language. Let's just use 8 because it's here. I mean, you can obviously change the number, but saying that the park shall have a maximum density of 8, so they're not going to go over that number. But maybe some qualifying, per gross acre, but has some qualifying language of. They capture what you're concerned about, unless it's trying to think of the words that you could use. Once that other land that you can't build on is removed, I'm trying to think out loud. It's not working, but to qualify it, it gives you as council and city staff more. Yes, our maximum's 8, but because your piece of property really is only you can only build on this small portion, you're gonna be on top of each other, so we're not gonna let you get to 8. But you have language within your code to let that ability to not let them go to 8 there. It's captured, if that makes sense. To qualify your ability to say, you can't do 8 based on your makeup of the property.
By default, by having those setbacks, aren't we in green space, doesn't it automatically force to a buildable number?
Yeah, I don't think you need a number here,
Yeah.
that's what my point
Okay.
is, yeah.
Oh, that's it, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a code without a density number. I don't know. That's one, I'd have to look at that one.
Maybe put a maximum on there and then.
Yeah, because you're right, because it's part of it is it's going to, with setbacks and the other requirements that we went to real quick there, it's going to also limit how many RVs can be on top of each other.
You can't
Because
park them
you're
in,
gonna
you
have
can't
to
park
have
them in
some
the
space.
road, or you
And it's
can't
gonna
park them in the
naturally limit them.
bathroom, or
Yeah.
there's other things that are gonna kind of squish the amount of buildable space by default.
And if we don't have that number, but we control it with the appropriate setbacks and whatnot, and the number just kind of falls out based on the site plan, at that point, can we look at the site plan and say, hey, these are too close together because this is too many people, we can't get fire trucks through here, or whatever the variables are.
I don't know, like I said, I've never seen a code like what we're talking about without density being addressed. I don't know if that's something that we want to do. So that's something I have to think about and look into.
With the density numbers in there, let's say we would keep it at the 18 like the rest of the stuff is.
Or
And we find it.
maximum of 18,
Well,
maximum of 18.
and so that,
You just use it again as an
That's
example, Dave.
example.
You just use an
So
example,
it's the same
right?
question. You have your maximum, but when they come in with their site plan and it has the 18, but
And it's all
when you look
squished
at
into
it,
one little
and I think
place.
that the circle that it won't be because the setbacks will come into effect. So they won't be on top of each other. You'll still have the setbacks.
Right.
So it's kind of a circular question. But I think that your question is, forget the setbacks. If we allow 18, but ultimately what you see you don't like is 18 and you want to say you only have 10. That's the question. And that's why I would be more comfortable if you had some language that noted you have that ability to limit that. And I can't articulate the best language right now to put in there, but I can come up with that.
Okay.
so, so this is, I think, an example of what you're saying and the impact of it. So the reason that they have kind of those pods of development is because a lot of the land you can't build on. And so what happens is they may have 97 acres, but like I said, the development is on a lot less than 97 acres.
If you look at that one right in the center there, those are RV spots right there. If you were to expand that out into an acre and just duplicate all that, it's way more than 3 per acre.
Yeah,
Under those trees, there's a whole bunch of spots.
there probably are, yeah.
They're hidden under those trees.
Yeah.
there, so.
So I guess my point in what I'm saying is when you look at the gross acreage site, and the density, even though you have what you think are other controls, like the space and the setbacks, as it gets larger, you can manipulate those numbers to make it look differently, right? And so in a large tract development, say you're not rewarding someone to have a large development, a lot of extra land, but I think you would be punishing them, maybe not the right word, but that's the word I'm going to use. You're punishing them because they have a lot of land if you took the density piece out of it. Because then it starts becoming, does the square footage that ultimately you have to build in for each one based upon the lot lines and everything else, maybe more constricting to what their development is going to be. And so I think putting a maximum density in there is one that allows you to control ultimately what those pockets look like, right? More so than what it looks like spread out across the acreage. Because again, that's what's going to happen is that they're going to put them on the land that they can put them on, right? They're not going to put them, if there was a lake there, they're not going to put them on the lake because they would sink and they probably couldn't sell them or rent them for very much. But, So I think density is a control, but it's also, you know,
That's not what's gonna really drive the train. It's gonna be the setbacks that are gonna drive
Yeah.
of the look of the RV
Right.
park.
Yeah, I mean, the density piece is going to be impacting, again, those areas where you can develop it, how many they're going to be able to put in those areas. And again, understanding that, you know, every, as you can see, all those are different. You know, if you go back, if you go to the fourth slide therein, or the fourth one from the left, yeah, on there. I mean, they're using every spot they can use.
That looks like a park. I don't want it.
And I think we all would look at that and say, that's not what we want,
No,
right?
us-
But so I think you do need to have that maximum number. And again, understanding that most likely the site conditions are going to be such that they're probably not going to be able to do that maximum number anyways.
With the setbacks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I mean, 8 to me is, and again, it's anemic. I mean, we should err on the side of caution, actually increasing that. And then, you know, because even with 8, if you've got 5 acres and you only got a quarter acre, you know, if you put 8 on a quarter acre, that's the only thing. I mean, that's too dense. So I don't think whatever number we choose here, it just depends on the layout of the property. So, you know, if we approve the site plan later on, we have the ability to say, no, this is way too dense based on your particular layout. But we don't want to, again, punish. We don't make it too restrictive to where you've got 5 acres and they're all really spread out.
So,
Because at the end of the day, it's a math problem to be able to do these developments, right? You got to make money, otherwise it doesn't make sense.
so using this as an example, Nancy, if, I don't remember the boundaries of this. Can you go back one slide, Ash, please? I think that had the, so, no, really, it is a lot of land.
The acre.
That doesn't look like 3.5.
Well, that's probably not showing 140
Okay,
acres.
it's not showing the 140 acres.
Yeah.
So, using that example, what you're saying, can we, if this plan was brought to us and it's only 3.5 per acre, but the rest of the property is not usable because it's wetlands and so on and so forth, can we go and say, no, we're not approving this?
Right, and that's
Because we don't want that.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm.
And is that your question,
Yeah,
Eric?
that was
Yeah.
the question. So I think the best way to address that is to have some kind of language within there that the maximum is, again, I'll use 8 because it's here, 8, some kind of qualifying language, and then I'm gonna have to work on that. and
Which
figure it out.
subject to our purview to
Right.
be able to
And
allow it or not.
see, because you don't want it, you want it to.
Subject to approval or subject to whatever.
They need to know. They need to know. The developer looking at it needs to go, oh, it's 8, okay, and here's my setbacks, and here's how I can do this, and they see how they can make it work for everything we have in your code, and then they can still come here and be told, no, we don't like it. We have to be really careful with something like that, right? So we want to make sure it's noted that yes, this is the maximum density. We have all of our setbacks, but there still may be some pullback from city council, but I need to work on the language and make sure we can
I still
address
think the
that correctly.
setbacks are really what's gonna drive the train of what it's gonna look like, so.
Yeah, because like you said, if like looking at the other slide you looked at where it's all kind of looks like it's in one section, they can't be on top of each other. It's going to limit how many they can build.
Thank you.
So with that in mind, then what number do we want to land on? I think I've just been looking at cities all over Florida around our area that kind of are within the same size. Some of them are a little bigger. Seems like the average is 10. I'm not saying that we should have that, but it looks like the average is between 10 and 15.
Yeah, that's what I found as well.
So maybe we should say, okay, 10, because if the land is completely developable, I mean, 10 per acre isn't that bad. It isn't very dense.
I mean, I'd even go right in the middle of that range, say 12 would be a good number. And again, if we have the ability to say,
12 based on the site plan, you know, you don't have a whole lot of room for 12 per acre because they're all packed into this little area. If we have the ability to dial that back and say, well, in your particular case, we'd like to see 10 just because you're, the way your lot is. But again, I don't want to be too restrictive so that when they do have all that, it's, they're forced into having a very sparse RV park.
Could we have between 10 to 15? Could we have that in
Maybe
there?
a max density, right?
Yeah, we just need one number
Yeah.
for max.
Some of them say 12, one of them was 11, 13, so it's.
1 acre is 208 feet by 208 feet, because I didn't, 1 acre to me is, you know, I have to, so I did look
It's
that up, so.
43,000 square feet.
Oh, that doesn't help me. 208 feet by 208 feet.
If I could, would you guys be opposed to letting the public speak? I know we've got some expert in this,
That's a
so maybe
good,
give
yeah, that'd be great.
could you guys comment on density? What do your experience?
Well, you need
Yeah,
to-
the mic.
Yeah.
Are you asking me to comment on?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lisa Freund, right now it's 8301 Congress. You're asking me to comment on how many sites are in a group?
Per acre, in your experience, I guess I mean, we see that 10 to 15 is kind of the range, some being less, some being more.
Sure. So I guess on an average site, it's usually like a nice RV park. They're usually, there's a lot of open space. So I think if you pick 10 or 12 or even, I mean, 8 is a little low, but it would still work because the sites are 20, 25 by however long, you know, you still have to have a maximum of 1,200 square foot of living space for the Department of Health in Florida. So there's certain codes that we have to follow or that the developers do. They do this all the time. That's what they're telling us. So in this particular property, it doesn't really matter if you pick 10 or 12. It's already determined based on that 1,200 foot and your setbacks.
Yeah. Well, the only thing, obviously, if we do pick a number that's lower than that, then they have to change that and they have to spread it
And I
out.
think it goes back to what I said before, exactly what you said, the 1,200, I didn't realize that 1,200 square foot is
It's the Florida Health Department.
Yeah.
that's the minimum.
Required the lot size
Yeah, I thought it said 13.
conforming anyway, but they need to.
That's usable lot space, not like we were talking lakes and stuff like that. Like the RV has to be on 1,200 square feet minimum.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's basically the answer right there, right? No?
No matter what, like if you pick too high, it doesn't really matter.
Well, no.
Yeah.
If you pick too low, though, it does matter.
If you pick too low, that matters. That's important to us. But if you pick too high, it really doesn't matter. We still have to follow those ordinances.
So that's what I was saying. The bigger the number,
That doesn't mean they're gonna go to it, but this.
they can't go to it.
Right.
So it's not going to hurt anything to have it that way because you're always going to fall back to
But
those.
we're gonna have other controls in there with the setbacks. I think the square foot, the minimum, I think is, I mean, that's Florida law anyway, so I think we can make it 1,200 or go to 13 or whatever, but we have that as well, so it's gonna be no less than that. So, okay, so what was your square foot on the acre? Do the math, David.
I did the math on 1,300 and it was 33 per acre.
Okay.
But if we have setbacks, I mean, I just did the divide.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
what I was
simple division. But
Right.
if you're gonna have setbacks, it's gonna knock that number down. So knock that in half and you're at what?
Well, you're gonna have the
15,
streets and stuff like that,
Oh,
take that out of that and stuff
So
like
you're
that, so I get
six,
it, yeah.
15, 18, you're right in that ballpark.
Okay.
And setbacks are gonna hold them to build within those confinements.
I like 15 then, because basically it's up to the Florida Department of Health. So 15 to 18. I mean, we could even,
I'd rather stay with 15, I don't.
15 sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't wanna go any higher than that at all.
15 sounds good.
If I take the 1,200 into that number, it's about 36 per acre. But that's
all jammed up on flat
That's
top.
like we didn't like.
That's a
yeah.
parking lot.
Yeah.
So
And I'm-
you divide that by two, what are you at, 18? You're back at 18, you're right in the ballpark again.
Yeah, but that doesn't take into consideration the roads and stuff like that, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha, perfect, gotcha.
There we go.
50.
And then you're okay with prohibiting the park models?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sorry, I was typing minutes. Took my clicker away.
Next section, all recreation space, vehicle space shall have a concrete pad or constructed of an adequate base, grade and surface to facilitate drainage and reduce dust as approved by the city. Individual recreational vehicle space shall have access from internal roadways, shall not have direct access from adjoining public right-of-ways. And each recreational vehicle space shall be marked and numbered for identification. I don't think there, I guess a discussion point could be number 3. Number 4, again, I think this is something that most likely in the areas of the city wouldn't be an issue, but you definitely don't want, the ability to just back out and, in the street without, proper access and warning for that. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory with that.
I like all three of these.
All good?
Yep.
Good.
But we, that's in setbacks yet, right? Oh, it's just 5. Okay.
No, you're
6.
not there yet. Number 6, dimensional standards. Each recreational vehicle space shall be a minimum width and depth to accommodate both recreational vehicle unit and the tow vehicle where dimensional standards are not specified or approved PUD master plan. Recreational vehicle spaces and other amenities areas shall be designated to meet the following minimum setback standards. So this is, you need to think of this in kind of a 2-step, right? Is they're going to be designing, whoever does this will be designing it based upon what all the requirements are. So as we heard, and what I provided you, the state of Florida says you have to build certain dimensional standards into this. And so that's what they'll be putting in there. And so if they weren't doing that, you would be then saying all these numbers have to be in there, but it's probably already going to be taken care of based upon what the state says. So this is 2 steps. If they don't have that dimensional standard already approved in the master plan, so what they bring to you, they would have to follow this. And so, I did not have the capability or ability to give you a diagram that kind of shows you these dimensions. So we laid it out here in the council chambers for you. If you look straight out in the seating area where everyone's sitting, they're actually in our RV. That's a space of about 14.5 feet, which is an average of a RV with, the sliding center. Yes. Could be larger, could be smaller, but the average was 14.5 feet. And so right where the line is right there is that. If you look at what this says for the minimum sideline, you go 5 feet out. And so that last row of chairs inside there is the 5-foot mark. So that would be, again, based upon this, what that RV site would look like.
So there'd be a 5-foot in between the chairs. That would be RV,
To the next
RV.
site. Yeah. So this would be one RV site. Now, it could be different the way that they lay it out,
Confused here.
but under this, that's what it would
So-
look like.
with the slides, the middle
Yep.
section
Yep.
is
RV with slides open.
with slides open.
Yeah.
All the chairs were the guys.
And the chair is the
The neighbor.
black, is the neighbor or the property line?
That's the neighbor's park RV. So
Yeah,
there's 5-foot
so-
gap in between there.
So they can hold hands.
No. So where the inside of the chairs are,
Uh-huh.
that is the 5-foot mark. So that's the 5-foot
And so then the next
sideline.
RV has to be 5 foot with the slides out?
Yeah. So
Oh, it'd be 10-foot in between them.
Yeah, so here, this set of blue markings in the middle here,
Mm-hmm,
so that's 10 feet.
okay.
So that would be the distance according to the minimum sideline of where the slide, the edge of the, so if you looked at this, so this set would be over here on this side, and then the next one would be to the left of that last blue piece of tape. So this would be what's in between the slides of the sides of the RVs. I didn't have the expense account to actually either get an RV in here, 2 RVs, or do a mock-up of them. We talked about it, but we didn't have cardboard, so.
I wonder if we could get their opinion on that. I don't have no clue what's a particular.
Didn't know you were gonna be answering questions, did you?
Diego Freund, 8301 Congress. So I'm not sure what I'm asking or answering.
The
With the,
space between RVs.
okay, so 14 feet on most fifth wheels, nice fifth wheels that you see are going to be roughly 2 foot. If there's a slide on both sides, it's 2 feet on both sides. So 4 feet plus 8. That's the general. When you're looking at 14, or you're getting into some bigger buses and stuff. So they do get bigger, but it's
The distance between us, so if you had 2 come in together, and there's, what's normally the space between the sites?
what we see typically is sites that are 20 wide by like 55 or 60, and then there's wider ones for the bigger buses, 30 and bigger. So it depends on how you lay them out. And, obviously the tighter they are, the more you're going to get in there, but it's not as desirable.
Right.
It doesn't, so it's not.
Lisa again, at 8301. So the average, like a nice, I'm gonna say like a KOA, a nice, they're 25 wide. And then the lengths vary depending on, they have ones for shorter campers, for longer campers, but 25. 25 is actually a really nice, so basically you can park your rig with your slides out, and then you can park your vehicle right next to it. And, the other person is there, but you have a whole camper width in between you and the next person.
So they vary because you don't want to have a 30 by 60 site that you have a tent on, taking up that real estate when, a bus pulls in and they're all the RV site, the big sites are taken. So you have a mix, so, to accommodate.
Thanks. So again, using our exaggerated
Thank you.
RV here, you would have a spot that's effectively 24-foot wide. And so that's kind of in that 25-foot range that he just talked about. And so there would be room on both sides, and under this code, a minimum 5 feet, which again, if we're talking the exaggerated size, which is 14.6, you would be, the 5 feet, approximately 5 feet, which gives you the 10 feet.
5 or 5.
Yes.
Each unit has
Yep.
5.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's the distance that would be between
The units.
the units.
With the pulled out slides.
Yeah.
The slide ends at the blue line, each side.
Oh yeah, so the slides, it ends at this side and that side over there.
Gotcha.
And so this would be what's in between.
Right.
So you have a minimum, if you took a tape measure from the side of the RV on one lot to the other, you'd have a minimum of 10 foot between
10
them.
foot. Okay.
And again, that is a minimum requirement.
Right.
And what, they suggested is, that's going to change based upon, the area in the park and, what, if they want a larger unit, they're going to want 30. And again, I don't know what a really large unit side to side really is, but probably not much more than 14 foot per acre.
It's going
So,
to be on the road, so.
Yeah.
Can we ask, Mr., do you have any input into these? Do you have any suggestions, ideas, or
No, basically
History?
what Matt's saying about the setbacks is the same thing you have in a house. When you just look at each lot as an individual house, so your house is, say, 40 foot wide, and you got 5 foot setbacks on each side, each lot's gonna have that, giving you that 10 foot in the middle. So, I agree with that.
I mean, I think the 5 foot is fine.
Yeah, when you look at it compared to each unit, it's really a 10 foot between.
Right, yeah.
So what you all have here is good.
Yeah. Now, we're just talking about sidelines right now.
Yeah, just the sidelines. And again, I think the rear line and the front setback, again, are going to be a function of how they lay it out. So I don't think that it would be contrary to what most are doing anyways for the, from the road to where, they would be parking this. Now, the question, and it came up previously when we've talked about this, is for the waterfront jurisdiction in wetlands.
Well, before you jump to that, I'd like to talk more about the setback off the road, the internal road line, because it's 10 foot here. And if you take the gap between those chairs, well, actually, it's this 10 foot here. So you're gonna have to have that much space off of the road, which seems to be a lot to me. I think 5 foot there as well is plenty.
You gotta turn.
Yeah,
You have to make a radius.
there needs to be for
You can't drive
vehicles.
onto, no, that has nothing to do with the road. This is, I mean, if you have to drive on a campsite, it's got a problem with the road anyway. This is just from where your campsite is, you have to have 10 foot off the
You
road.
have to turn off the road into the campsite.
This is not on the road.
On the driveway of the campsite. There's a road that you have to get to your campsite.
Into the campsite.
Yes, and what this setback is you have to be 10 foot off of the road.
Right.
Yeah, so the rear or the front, depending on how they look at it, has to be 10 foot from the line of the road. So that would be the road.
So whether you're right up on the road or you're 10 foot back from it, you're not on the road. And the road has to be wide enough to accommodate turning. Yeah, I mean, when I turn down on Green Street, I don't drive on the corner lot. I stay on the road.
I think 10 foot is appropriate. I think I don't think no.
When you park your car in your driveway, you stay 10 foot off the road.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm back up to the garage.
You got to think that some people are towing their, like my uncle and aunt, when they come down, they have their Jeep on the back with a trailer on it. What if they need?
Right, but I mean, your parking space for your house. I mean,
But this is not a house. That's a stationary object.
Sure.
Yes, we have experts here.
You guys want to comment on that?
For a 1,200 square, I mean, if you're going to follow the minimums that they're talking about here, 1,200 square foot, that's going to equate to a length, right? I mean, what's the length and width on that?
It varies. So varies would be 50 to 60 is what seems to be typical in most newer RV parks.
And what is the length?
10 feet does seem, in my opinion, 10 feet does seem, you're going to be at 10 feet. The road itself, which is going to have to be big enough to accommodate, swinging around corners. If on a corner, it's going to be a wide section of the road so that you can stay on the road in order to navigate the corner. But then another 10 feet. So, the road is most likely going to be 15 feet. So, that's a lot of real estate. So.
Just dimensionally, to get 1,200 square feet, you're going to have length by width. So what's the average length of a 1,200 square foot unit? I was going to put the onus on you to do the math, so I didn't have to do it.
Typically, what we see is I mean, you typically it's a 45-foot fifth wheel. So you're gonna want 50 feet is gonna be pushing it. You're gonna need.
You have the vehicle, the tow vehicle, as well as the.
So obviously the tow vehicle is gonna have to be put on the side in a case like that. That's where you're really looking towards the 55 to 60 foot length sites, or make that for a smaller trailer, a smaller coach to fit a row of smaller, smaller row, so.
And I guess when I go to a campground and you see the fifth wheel stuff backed into their sites, right? They unhook, and a lot of times they'll take the truck, they'll go get groceries or whatever. They come back and they park right in front. Unless it's a really big one, then they kind of angle it or whatever. But I mean, they're not 10 foot off the road. And like when
Well, no, the vehicle that's, we're not talking about the parked, the vehicle that comes in and out.
well, that's
I'm talking
the question.
about, this is the
setback, does this
RV,
impede the vehicle from being able to park right up against the road?
this is the RV vehicle, not
Well,
the
RV and
truck
the
that
tow
trailers
vehicle, I
it.
think.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're one and the same in this context, so what you're looking at is the setback is for either the trailer or the vehicle. It's pulling the trailer.
So when I back in with the fifth wheel, I'm backing into my spot. 10 foot off the back of the space. I have to leave 10 foot in front of my bumper. So you got 20 foot.
Well, this is 5 foot rear line.
Rear is 5. It's the fourth column.
So, yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's yeah. For pull through. I'm sorry. Yeah, 10 and 5. So 5. So it's 15. So 5 foot off the back, and you get 10 foot. I'm just saying, like when I pull in my driveway, and I pull up and I have somebody else come over, they park behind me. I'm still, you don't want to be parked right on the road, but you don't need to be 10 foot off the road either. That's why I think 5 foot is probably a better number there. It's the same way in the back, right? And let's see the back in, there should be space. So a back in space could technically have a road on out of, so in that scenario, you're 5 foot off that road just because the back setback is back in space.
Right, if they have like a pull through on either side, yeah.
So to me, 5 foot front and back off the road line is adequate. I don't know why we got 10 foot there.
Because I think that's appropriate.
Why is it appropriate?
I agree.
He got it off, he got it from the other, did you just come up with that number, Matt, or did?
This is based upon the Crystal River.
And they had 8.
No, not all of them did not have 8 hours.
What I'm saying is, again, these are numbers that they came up with. They had 8 in their maximum density. So that doesn't mean that there's some magic thing about 10. I'm just saying, practically, do we need to be 10 foot off the road? And I don't think you do. Why do we need, I'd be happy to entertain ideas on why we need to have 10 foot space off the road.
Do you guys need space on either side of the road?
For us,
Yeah.
for apparatus, I mean, you need the width of the roadway for the apparatus itself, but then if we're bringing other apparatus in, aerial trucks, it's on. You have to have room for outriggers to come out as well. So I was just messaging Tom, the width of the fire trucks, do you know off the top of the head what they are?
No, but looking at NFPA, pardon me for this, guys, I think it's 1194. So there's 2 things that reference these parks. It's NFPA 1.
You got some.
It's there's 3 things that govern this from a fire perspective. It's NFPA 1, NFPA 1194, and Florida Statute 69A-42. Most of these setbacks going through NFPA, and again, just browsing through NFPA as we're talking here, all reference 10 foot, 10 foot, 10 foot. Nothing references from the road 10 foot, but all other, for instance, here it says that the minimum width of recreational vehicles and camping ground roads designed to accommodate all types of size of camping units shall be 10 feet per traffic lane and 8 feet per parasol parking lane.
So is that Florida statute, or what is that?
That's NFPA 1194.
What does that mean?
The National Fire Protection. That's the fire code that when they put a site plan in front of us, that we would reference.
Okay.
So what you're saying is that you have to have, what was the number again?
So it says the minimum width of recreational vehicle park and campground roads designed to accommodate all types and sizes of camping units shall be 10 foot per traffic lane.
This is road. This is road. We're
This is
talking
the
about.
road. And 8 feet per parcel parking lane. Parallel parking lane. So the road's got to be, if you're going to have 2 lanes, it's got to be 20 feet wide. If you're going to have a going and coming lane.
Right. And what's our road in here?
Well, it depends. If it's one way, I think it's
Well-
15 feet.
Which speaks to 10.
Yeah.
So
Again, so the NFPA normally sets a standard like right at, and then allows the cities to go above that.
all right, so our roads are going to be 15.
But that's in
15
this,
inches.
On a one-way.
It's 15 inches. Isn't it? It's 15 inches. Should be 15.
Oh yeah, that needs to be changed. It's right here, right after the
It's
limestone. The
15.
roadway would
So
be
on its
15
edge.
in width.
Yeah, it's
That's 15 in width, not
Huh?
inches.
yeah, it's missing feet.
Should have a
No, I
little
get
foot thing
that.
there.
That's why I got a big circle around it in red.
Well, I think it's 15 foot in width.
Yeah.
It's, again, it's not inches there.
Well, and then on 2 lane, I think it was 24, right? 24 feet.
Right. But again, we're not talking about the road. We're talking about, we're talking about off the road.
but the fire says 8 foot, right? Is that what
Well,
you
yeah,
said,
it's
Tom?
8 foot above parallel parking. What was that about?
That's if you're parking alongside the road.
Yeah, that's for parallel parking, so,
Parallel
yeah.
parking.
That the per traffic lane and 8 feet per parallel parking lane,
If they're parking along the road.
if they're parking along the road, yeah.
But we don't allow that in this.
And this is,
But that's on the road. This is gonna be on grass.
Well, you guys have mentioned in the code, it says in this code too, that, correct or wrong, but, they have to accommodate the parking for the tow vehicle in the square.
Right.
Is what we're talking.
I'm still good with either 8 or 10. I'm not good with 5.
8's fine with me, I guess, if we got, I mean, 10 seems like a lot.
So it's only 2 foot.
I mean,
It's this big, Eric. 2 foot.
Again, I don't know, if I put an RV park there and I was hamstrung by a 10-foot thing, you know, it's,
It looks like the average is 5 foot for what I've been looking at. So
there you go.
I'm going with the fire, not with
Well,
the National Fire,
Well, that's
the
different.
National Fire Safety
That's
Code.
not talking about, that's talking about parallel alongside the road. This is not, that you're pulling in,
This is for the
this is perpendicular to the
spaces
road.
of the RV.
This is like your driveway off the road, is what it is. Your car coming in and out.
Not the roadway itself, but it's setback, in other words, minimum setback. So in other words, you cannot park within 10 feet of the road, is what it's saying.
Which is a lot.
yeah, it looks like
I mean,
said,
that's a lot.
I don't have a problem with the car being there. I have a problem with an RV being that close. Because where are you gonna park all these vehicles?
Well,
Where are you gonna
there's
park
another-
them? You
well,
get
there's
the, you
another-
get the slides pulled out. Where are
there's
you
another
parking all
section
this
about
stuff?
Parking as well, right? So,
Well,
But if you look at the pull-through, a lot of these parks, they have a lane behind and a lane forward. And they don't have them in a 90, they have them in a 45 because these vehicles don't turn
Right, I saw that on the pictures.
as well. But on a pull-through, there's no setback on the rear line. But there's a 10 on the front. But technically, that rear line is just like the front line. So
that's a
it
good
doesn't
point.
make sense.
there you could be right up against the road.
You're right.
You're back in.
well, again,
In a back end space, you do need the buffer. So
because I think the way that I would interpret that minimum rear line for pull-through space,
Yeah.
why they don't have that is because either side of a pull-through, I mean, it indicates that it's on a road, both sides. So your setback would be 10 foot, because the rear would be considered the front as well.
okay, so the 10 would go. All right.
It says from the edge of the internal roadway line, maybe that's what you're talking about. Minimum front setback from edge of the internal roadway line, so that's where you got that from.
And I mean, sometimes you're gonna have people that pull their fifth wheel in, and they're not gonna unhook it, they're just gonna leave it all hooked together, if they fit within the spot. So again, if you got 20 foot on the spot, 10 in the front, 10 in the back, it's just a lot of space that's unusable. That's why I think 5 and 5 is fine. I mean,
You need to get around them. I mean, it's not like you can have it jammed up. I mean, if you had a back end, like you look at the other one, back end space, you got a minimum rear line of 5 feet. So you can't go back against the wall flush. You'd have to be back 5 feet from the wall. So in that case, you're got a 15 foot. Because you got a front setback and a rear setback.
Mhm. I mean, in my mind, there is absolutely no reason that you couldn't be 5 foot off the road and be fine. I don't know, so, I mean, you're not driving on the campsites, you're driving on the road, and the road's gonna be adequate for the traffic. You know, I mean, if you're parked right up on the road, you're technically okay, I mean, unless you're driving off the road. So I think 5 foot is plenty of buffer to be off the front. But that's my opinion.
I feel we should just keep it the way it is, 10 feet, and move forward.
Can we ask them some more questions? So, you all have obviously, I mean,
We've camped a lot.
yeah,
A lot.
exactly.
See 1 to 0, a lot. So 5 is quite a bit. 10, you know, the reality is the fire department and vehicles need space. The road needs to be big enough to make sure that you know, everybody can travel. But realistically, we see 1-2 feet off of the line all the time. And that's what we see.
I've never been at a campground that had footed off the road. Man, you don't play cornhole in front of your camper.
It's not every camper, but you know, when you get the big ones, they
need more space.
They need more space. So it happens. And your question on parking, you know, a lot of times every fifth wheels will unhook and park alongside it because the lot is wide enough for the RV and the vehicle, because the slide outs aren't the full length of the unit. So they're, you know, it just.
And I understand you guys are looking at doing a high-end one. The problem I have is, this is for if we get, I mean, not for your specific. This is the bare minimum. I understand you guys are going above and beyond, and I get that. So this is not necessarily for you guys, because you guys are already exceeding what we're talking about, but this is for somebody else who might want to come in and just jam every single thing in there, and there's a safety issue for not only the residents that are in there, but for our fire and police that are going in there. So I just want you to understand, I understand that you are absolutely going above and beyond and exceeding what we're talking about.
And that's why we have one-way roads throughout as much as possible as well. Just.
So to that fact, I mean, you essentially plan this thing so that you do have good flow through the park. And one of those motor coaches is much larger than a fire truck, I believe, isn't it?
Some of them can be. Fire trucks, 36 feet, your average motorhome dog myself. From 22 foot to 45 with. Then you have trailers and tow vehicles, and then a lot of campsites also account for not just the tow vehicle and the camper. They account for a space for friends or family to visit to park another car.
Yes.
So some of those, and just talking from the camper perspective, some of that other space does account for that purpose. For cornhole and space just to have a paved spot, you know, a place to do things, and like you said, parking auxiliary vehicles. But from our perspective, the roadway has to be cleared. You can't park on the roadway. All right. As long as we can get apparatus there, that's the main focus for us.
Would you all be comfortable with a certain setback?
The more room you give me, the better. I mean, outriggers on a ladder truck are 12 to 16 feet. So the more room you give us, the better.
So 10 feet is.
But you wouldn't need a ladder truck in the RV park.
I mean, I'm gonna push when NFPA's standing behind, and that's it. You know what I mean? I'm not asking for anything more. Just as long as we get our trucks to do it, if we can get a little bit more space to, you know, allow those outriggers to come out, that's great. But you know, I would never ask for anything more than
That's 8 feet then.
the minimum the NFPA.
Well, the outriggers too, I mean, you're gonna have 10 foot in between the stuff too. I mean,
That's
you
what
pull
you
up
do.
right alongside the.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if something burning, you're not going to be right up against it anyway, right?
Exactly.
So
That's
you'd be down the road a little bit, probably.
A lot before and a lot after. So
Right, and you got 10 foot in between them, minimum. So for whatever it is, I mean, it's really it's impacting parking and whatnot more than anything.
Yeah. Like I said, most of that extra space is accounting for that vehicle parking. That, in my camping experience, not fire.
Yes, that's exactly right.
I say we go with the 8 foot.
I have a question. Do we have a minimum in here for the width of the road?
Yes.
Yeah.
Later.
15. It's 15 inches.
Well, maybe it wouldn't hurt to
It's going to be
look at
15
that
foot.
now. And,
Well, that's what I'm saying, because,
It will not be
maybe, because the National Fire Safety, recommendation was 10 foot, Tom, is that correct?
But you're exceeding.
yeah, we're seeing by
Well,
5.
no, that's what I'm trying to say. Maybe maybe we're saying the same thing in two different ways. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so if you think about that from the 10 foot, like,
Well, we're gonna find out.
Right.
So,
So number 3, the pertinent part, the internal private roadway shall have at least one direct connection to a paved public street, have a pavement width of 24 feet in accordance with city specifications, shall consist of concrete, asphalt, or crushed limestone. The roadway may be 15 feet in width if it is designed for a one-way, as long as there is a minimum of 24 feet of unobstructed clearance and a minimum of 60 feet in turning area and radii to permit free movement of emergency vehicles. So in this particular language, the pavement may be 15 feet, but there has to be a minimum of 24 foot of unobstructed clearance. So that's on the sideways, right? So it's 15 feet of pavement, but you have to have 24 foot of unobstructed clearance.
So that's 4.5.
so that's, math is 9 feet total.
so in this scenario, 15 foot.
No, is that correct?
So in this, so from the roadway to the unobstructed clearance, right, would be, so it's 9 feet more, so it's 4.5 foot. But that's a different number than what would be the setback, right?
Oh, okay.
Setback requires 10 feet. So there's an overlap in the clearance. So they couldn't, under this, if you said, okay, they can park 0 lot line, they can park right on there. Well, this section would say, no, you can't, because you have to provide us 4.5 foot off the pavement that, there can't be anything. So with this, you're automatically, not allowing them 4.5 foot from the edge of pavement to put anything.
So now you're at 14.5 foot with a 10 foot setback.
Right.
Well, the setback is different, because the setback is saying you have to be 10 foot off the road pavement, right? So this is saying you can't put anything in between, the road pavement and 4.5 feet, because we want 24 out of 15, right? And so the setback is saying that distance has to be 10 feet. So you're adding 6 more feet onto that to get the setback.
So it's not 4.5 plus 10.
Correct.
That's good.
Yeah, the two overlap. So if you said, well, we want 0 setback, then you'd have to change that 24 feet of unobstructed clearance to, 15 feet total.
So with this number 3, and then having that 5 foot, what the mayor was recommending, then that would give
Well, no, it would be
9.5.
no, it would be 5 foot, because you're saying that they effectively can park a foot, less than a foot off of
half a foot.
Yeah, 6 inches off of that clearance that this particular section requires. But effectively, it's 5 foot off the pavement
already, or 4.5.
Yeah.
And if we put another 10, that would make it 14.
No.
You're measuring from the same spot.
Yeah.
So for the
Okay,
setback,
measure
yeah,
from-
you're measuring from the side of the pavement. So the setback would be measured from that spot, and so would the D3, 24 foot of unobstructed clearance would be measured from the same spot, so they would overlap.
So 5 foot would cover the 4.5 foot required for.
It'd be more than that.
Of course, but plus a half a foot.
Right.
Would that still comply with the
Of
national?
course.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've been going through the code, and from what I can tell from what I looked at right here, it, in 1194, it does not address anything about distance from the road. It just addresses width of the road.
And so,
And that is included there.
so way to think about, so again, they're different sections and they have different meanings to them, right? So this one really is addressing what the chief is saying in terms of, I need elbow room to operate, right? This is saying, you know, we're gonna give you 4.5 foot on both sides of a 15-foot roadway for elbow room. It's not necessarily addressing what a setback would be. And so if you think about it from a residential perspective, you know, you have a driveway that goes up to the front of the house, right? And what normally will happen is, you know, you can park in front of your garage, but you can't park blocking the sidewalk. And so even though your front setback may be 20 feet, the reality is you can only park in 15 foot of that driveway because you're not allowed to block the sidewalk. Sidewalk, if it's, you know, normal 5 foot, you wouldn't be able to park here. So that's kind of the setback thought process.
I like 5 feet then. Now that we have it explained to us properly. Thank you everyone for explaining that properly.
I agree. I think 5 foot's more than adequate.
Yeah. All we're required by our own code is 4.5 foot. So for that specific part of it. So I think 5 is good. Personal.
Well, around 5.
I still go for 8 majority rules. You know, you don't know what you-
I'd rather go with 8.
Do I hear 7? Do we split the baby?
Again,
I'm just trying to make it out safe for everybody. That's all. I'm not trying to be a bum.
I don't see the safety issue.
Not until you need them. You know, right now we're sitting here, we never see the safety issue until it's needed. And then when it's needed, then we start bitching about we don't give them what they needed. So let's plan for our first responders because we don't do that. And I'm sorry, they need to be included in all this.
Well, they are, and he just referred to the road width, which is 10 foot required by law.
Here's the thing, it's a balance, right? Obviously, Chief, you'd like to have a football field in between your thing. I mean, the more space, obviously, the better.
No, that's not, I can't agree with that though, because then I got one more hose.
Well, you get more hose, right?
You'll have to go back to my
The further you can get away, the better. So, but if you focus so much on that aspect and you're too safe, you're not going to have the development in the first place because nobody can make it work. It doesn't make sense to have that much space off the road. I mean, would I want to be told when I pull in my driveway that I got to pull my car all the way in? I'm 10 foot off the road? No, of course not. If a fire truck comes down there, I'll give you a perfect example of my house. When I back out, I've got, we can park, people come around and cut the grass. They pull up, they don't pull off the road, they stay on the road, they park there, they pull their thing out. When I try to back out of my driveway, I can hardly do it because they're right there blocking me, all right? And heaven forbid my house caught on fire while he's mowing the grass. I mean, so you can think of scenarios where, you know, all hell breaks loose and you're in a tight spot, but, you know, those are, you know, pie in the
That's
sky
our job,
type.
Eric, to keep people safe. That's our job.
I don't, again, if I thought 5 foot off the roadway on both sides impacted safety, I would not recommend it. But I don't see a problem in it. And I've been to several of these RV parks. Like you said, if they're 1 foot off, it's, you know, I mean, they're not
you're not building homes, they're not staying there, they're pulling it out maybe after a week, maybe a month, they're transit type things. So now, obviously a house that's gonna be there all the time, there could be an issue. But in this case, you're talking about really just a vehicle, not even the RV. The RVs more than likely are not gonna have, they're not gonna be that long where they're taking up the whole space. It's more just the tow vehicle or the parking vehicle or whatever. And again, if you're forcing to go all the way 10 foot in, it's a lot. I don't think it impacts safety. Otherwise, I'd be in agreement. I just never seen that. Why should Port Richey with our first RV park be so restrictive that you got to be 10 foot off the road? I don't want to put that kind of, the least restrictions to accomplish the goal. That's the way I look at things. And if 10 foot is, we have to have 10 foot, well, let's make it 10 foot. I just question whether that's actually needed. So.
I could go with either one.
I would like to see 8 foot.
8 foot's fine.
As long as it's not 10, I still think it's too much, but if,
The good news is, Eric, we can change it. This is not written in, this is not written in
that's the
stone.
thing, that's what I want to get at. We can change
this-
anything, that's
this can-
true.
This can be changed like everything else.
How about a suggestion of 7? Just a little bit less. It's almost right.
Oh my God, 7, Eric. Good Lord, fine. Take 7.
I'll go
What
with
if they
7.
make it 7?
No, 7. I'll go with 7.
7 it is.
7. I'll give 2 foot.
7's a good number.
And this is for both the 10s I see on here will become 7s?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. It's for both of them?
Yes.
7? Yes.
We all compromise.
Yes.
It's a compromise.
I was hard set on 5, so I'm giving you 2 foot.
Going twice.
7 it is.
So, yeah, you think that was the one that's gonna drive the conversation?
That was painful.
We're not even off this way.
I had visions of a fence.
Just some ways to go still. All right,
The
so-
other,
Don't know.
Oh, don't bring it up.
there's still, that's not done yet. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Oh,
But-
we're not done?
No.
Let me
Yeah,
turn my
just
tape
the
back.
first
Hold, please.
column.
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought the real conversation was going to be
I did too.
on the last column, which is the waterfront jurisdictional wetlands, which would be 25 feet, which again, this was lifted directly from Crystal Rivers. And again, they are a little bit different than the situations we would have in the RA1. Their areas that they were going to allow this were up against riverfront and other sensitive areas that are actually out of their control because the state of Florida would be intervening with that. And so they were kind of following what those requirements were going to be as they put that there. We don't have in those A1 areas, off the top of my head, I don't think we have any of those jurisdictional waterfronts, but there could be wetlands. Again, we wouldn't find that out until the development comes forward and is classified as wetland. And to be honest, would probably be out of our control anyways, because another jurisdiction will be saying you have to be X amount of feet away from that. So understand this number could be different if you want it to be different. To give you a idea of what 25 foot looks like, Sal, if you'd point there. From that blue piece of tape all the way back to the back wall is 25 feet.
And again, like I mentioned before, my comments on that's a lot as well. And so if you look at the front of that chair out in the audience, the wall is 15 foot, which I think is plenty enough off the water.
I'm not
I have no problem with 15.
I would definitely consider looking into that number as far as what FDEP and SwiftMud would have recommendations for.
They would control that.
Because they're going to control that, especially going forward. Already discussing the new MS4 stormwater reporting. They're doing a lot of changes to the permit, so I would definitely check that number out before setting that.
So can we, instead of putting a number in that, because I'm sure the, SwiftMud, et cetera, will change that, just can we reference to whatever their standard is?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, instead of putting a
Well,
number
the
in
other thing,
there.
if it's, say it's 5, maybe we want actually some buffering off the water. I mean, you don't want to be parked on the lake, even if SwiftMud says it's okay, that's the only thing. But
We can try to find out what that number is. Leave it at,
'Cause I mean, I have no problem
leave it at
making
15
that-
now, find out what that number is.
yeah, leave it at 15, and if it's greater than that,
Yeah.
Yeah, and understand that that is a minimum. So again, you know, SwiftMud's minimum may be a different number than what our minimum is, which would probably be greater than what our minimum is.
SwiftMud would supersede our number, whatever that is.
So what this would take a place of is if SwiftMud says, oh, you don't have any issues, you know, we don't care. We're saying we don't want it to be any.
That's good.
I don't want you don't want people parking right up on the water.
So 15 for now. We'll see what SwiftMud says.
If I'd known y'all been that easy, I'd give
No,
you
that's
10
what I
foot.
thought you guys
So. I'm just kidding.
Is there nothing else on that slide?
No.
Beat that slide down. Still on standards, temporary structures such as campus awnings, screen enclosures, or platforms which are normal camping equipment may be erected but must be removed when the recreational vehicle space is vacated. No other structure or addition shall be built or become part of any recreational vehicle. So that one is, it allows, you know, to put a structure up where they can sit and keep away from mosquitoes or other bugs, I guess, in that. But they can't like build an addition that's attached to the RV or the trailer. Again, if it's this is a transient lodging area and we don't want permanent structures built there. Unless otherwise indicated on an approved PUD master plan, camping shall be limited to one campsite per designated recreational vehicle space and shall not be allowed in any other designated area. So with this one, you know, if the developer comes in and says, hey, we want to have tent camping, you know, they could easily say, we're going to have this site right here, and we're going to have 15 tent sites on it. And so it's very clearly spelled out. What this is saying is not that. Is if you don't come forward with that, the most you're going to have is one per campsite, or one campsite per designated recreational space. So again, if they come in and there's 70 RV sites, well, they could have up to 70 campsites spread throughout there without necessarily coming to you and saying, I want 70 in this one area.
Can you have an RV and a tent?
Pardon me?
Can you have an RV and a tent on the same site? Is that what that says?
Well, if you go to back to number 7, where temporary structures such as canvas awnings, screened enclosures, or platforms, I guess, you know, not necessarily a tent. I mean, I guess it's possible. I'm not into camping or RVing or anything like that, so I don't know what I'm talking about. That is a caveat to this. You know, I could easily see where maybe I don't want my kids in my RV, put them out in a tent, right? So that would be, you know, a screened enclosure, I guess, keep them away from me. So that would be different than a campsite.
Yeah.
So on their PUD master plan, they wouldn't necessarily show, or maybe they would. So I have a layout. Let's say I have all RV spaces, right, all pads or whatever. In that master plan, do I say, if I don't have an RV there, I'm going to have a provision for 2? Or are you saying that in their master plan, here's my section of RVs, here's what I'm kind of reserving for tents? Because what I can see here is let's say you have all no tent camping, it's all just RV spots, but you want to allow tent camps. Are they going to be limited to just one, or can they do 2? Based on this, it would just be they can only have one tent per space, and that space could be rather large if you're camping in a tent. You could put 2 or 3 on there, perfectly fine. But they wouldn't necessarily show that on their master plan because it's
of course, do business, they don't have all their RV spots filled, so they're gonna allow some camping.
That's what that's saying.
Okay. So I would suggest that, and let me ask a question for you guys. What, as far as tents on a campsite that's an RV site as well, what's a normal number that you would, maximum number that you allow?
Where would you put them?
Lisa Berlin, 8301 Congress. So typically, if they're just tent camping, you got mom and dad's tent, you got kids' tent, and maybe you have a teenager, so it really depends what the size of the thing. So we would probably structure that based on the size of if they have a 1,200 square foot, or if they've got a bigger lot or whatever. I think what it's referring to is people like to rustic camp, and you have an acreage that maybe doesn't have any electricity or all of that. We don't have any plans for that, but some people do enjoy that. Maybe that's what it means when you can have so many structure or so many tents on. But it would really be anywhere from 3 to 4 per site, depending on.
Yeah, but this is gonna have a concrete pad. Tent camping is, you can't pound a stake into concrete, so it's gonna limit you right there, so.
Well, it doesn't have to be, it could be gravel, an adequate base, that'd be concrete.
Yeah, usually the pad is for the vehicle, and then the other maybe 10 is grass. So they put their.
That would be the only spot you could put it, so that alone limits you.
So what this is limiting is, so using the example of, okay, we're one party, it's going to be mom and dad and, a tent for each of the 3 kids. So 4 tents. You could put 4 tents on that one campsite. But what you couldn't do is, under this language, have 2 separate families, say, okay, I'm going to split that site up and have 2 different, individuals on there, because it's a campsite.
Not tent.
Oh, okay.
I was reading it as tent.
I was reading it as.
So what this is doing is interchanging campsite with RV site.
Gotcha.
So if me and my wife and you and your wife want to go camping together, in that analogy, I couldn't put my tent and you could put your tent on the same campsite. We have to have our own separate campsites.
All in one tent.
As long as they're touching, like that's fine.
Unless you join them.
Yeah. Like our accessory.
See, I say, no, I think you could be able, because you're a party of, you're all inclusive.
Right, I agree.
So.
But that's to make sure our language doesn't restrict that.
But I can't go, they can't rent me a campsite for me, and then the next day Susie Q comes in with her 14 kids and has another campsite next to me. No.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. Obviously, this would be it's you're in it, but you could put multiple campsites on it to a certain. I mean, maybe we don't want 4. Maybe it gets too crowded on one campsite. So
I don't think we should restrict how many tents.
I don't think we can. We're not going to be in there counting. They're going to be doing that.
Yeah. And so I think that it just also means like they can't tent in any other area but what is designated for specific recreational vehicles.
Yeah.
So like they can't tent in the road space that the firefighters need to drive down. And it's
Or in the open area, right?
unless it's designated as a tent camping area, right? Because they could do that.
Right, if they want to allow tent camping in there, the
that'd be a
tent campers
floodplain.
want to pay their price, that's.
So this is just for the. So as long as this one campsite doesn't get translated into, oh no, you can only have one tent. I'm good. I was reading it like that. The lawyer read it like that too, so that means something.
That's pretty bad, isn't it? Yeah.
And guess who's going to interpret the law? That one right there.
And you'll fight me.
Yeah, she tells me no all the time, believe me.
But it clearly says site, not tent. So every word has a meaning, and when I skip words, I mess up too. So yeah.
The last section, fire shall be made only in stoves and other equipment or structures intended for such purposes and placed in safe and convenient locations where they will not constitute fire hazards to vegetation, undergrowth, trees, and recreational vehicles. So it basically says you just can't build a campfire any place you want. There has to be, a stove or other equipment or structure that's intended, like a actual fire pit that's designed to contain the fire.
Can't set the kids' tents on fire.
That,
Do it
that
come with
would, that would
marshmallows?
probably, I mean, not specifically prohibited, but frowned upon.
What was that about marshmallows, you said?
I want to know if it comes with marshmallows.
Oh, of course.
There's two types of burning. One's land clearing or clearing of debris that you have in your yard, and that kind of burning is prohibited. And then there's recreational burning, which is I want to make a s'more, melt some marshmallows and sit around a campfire and enjoy a beer with friends. Those are recreational fires, and that's what they're talking about there. So we would allow those in the city as long as they are in some sort of containment area, a reasonable size. There's no embers flying out of them, and they're always occupied. So we have certain criteria to allow recreational burns within the city.
And so the details, as the plan goes through the process for approval, they would look at that and say, where will campfires be? And they'll have to spell out, what is, where they will be, what kind of structures or equipment they're going to be using to contain that.
In other words, you could have fire pits, something like Whiskey Joe's got.
I'm not familiar with theirs, but they have the fire rings. They can have those, or the commercially bought ones you buy at Walmart, the metal ones. So they have to contain the fire. I guess there's a series of things. They have to contain the fire. They have to contain the embers. And then the other big thing is somebody always has to be there with them. But we could work with the park owners on that and give them our criteria. They would put that into their park rules.
Well, just from my understanding, let's say a lot of times you see rocks lining a fire area, would that be acceptable, or does it have to be some kind of commercial type?
That would be acceptable as long as it's containing the firing.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of the rocks. I mean, it's aesthetically pleasing, but it's also the main focus is to contain the fire from spreading out of there. Right. So you couldn't have rocks around it looking pretty and logs hanging out of it.
Right.
That defeats the purpose of it all. So.
No fun.
Do you think it would be, and maybe not, this is just listening to the very specific requirements that the city has, the fire department has for people within the city. Number 9, I think, might either need to use those specific words that he just said a couple times, or make a reference that it needs to comply with the fire department's policy, which might be easier because you might change your policy. I don't know.
So they literally copy and paste NFPA on number 9 is what that is.
Oh, there you go.
But in our fire code, we are going to require them in the fire code when we review their plans that we'll have to, that the fire department approved fire safety rules and regulations shall be conspicuously posted by management. So we're going to require that when we do our site plan that they have fire safety rules that we approve.
Okay.
Good.
Yep.
C is landscape and buffering. Recreational vehicle parks shall have a buffering in accordance with the provisions of section 12795 or specifically required by the city council in its approval action. So there is section 12795, the buffering requirements. In they're quite, yes. But again, or is specifically required by the city council in its approval action. So, I mean, you could, how we would view that is you would be more strict than that, because there could be a situation where, thinking of a very intensive use, there's a drive-in restaurant next to a residential unit. You're probably going to be more restrictive in terms of what that buffer is to protect the nature and the quality of life for those residents. Where in an agricultural district that is more spread out, you might not have as strict of a buffering requirement, but at least a minimum of what this is. And again, side property line, where the rear or side property line of a lot developed or proposed to be developed for non-residential use adjoins a residential zoning district, residentially developed area, or public street adjoining any residential district or residentially developed area, suitable buffering in the form of a solid fence, a masonry wall, or plant material shall be provided, said along the entire length of the property line. So again, in this particular use, you may not be saying you have to have a masonry wall, but you may say, we want planting materials that will buffer between the uses. Then if that is the case, it goes further, says the plant materials should be of an evergreen variety capable of obtaining the required minimum height and shall be properly maintained. And again, not getting specific to the development that could be coming down the line, but again, in areas that are agricultural, there's probably going to be already some buffering that, depth that you could, already be in place that the developer will be bringing forward with that. But again, these standards are the minimums, and you could require more.
Fine with me.
Good.
All existing, so this is where we get into our tree discussion. All existing trees having 4 inches DBH or more that are located within the designated buffer shall be maintained and must be protected by establishing a tree protection zone pursuant to requirements for trees and tree protection of this land development code. These may be counted as contributing to the total tree requirement. No site grading shall be allowed within the buffer.
DBH, what is that?
That is, probably about 2 hours ago, I could tell you off the top of my head, but.
And should we spell it out on there, I suppose?
I think, actually, I have the tree protection code, if you could pull that up.
Do, yes, but you're gonna have to direct me because the 115.4 kind of goes. It's diameter at breast height.
Oh, there you go.
Diameter at breast height.
Yes. That's
interesting.
For the average person.
That's about 5 feet high.
That is a strange thing.
I didn't know we had a tree protection zone. I'm still giggling at that.
It's standard for measuring trees.
Okay.
And it refers to a tree diameter measured at 4.5 feet above the ground. So you're almost there.
Oh, so DBH actually has a number?
Okay.
Why don't we put
Tree
that?
diameter measured at 4.5 because it may change.
Oh, okay, so change the standard.
Right? Yeah.
So what is the saying?
Jeez.
You gotta protect them if they're bigger than 4 inches in diameter.
So they cannot.
Yeah, so in the buffer zone, so if in the buffer zone existing prior to the development, where they're going to have the buffer, if there's a existing tree that has a 4 inches in diameter at 4.5 feet, they have to protect it. They have to be maintained. It must be protected by establishing a tree protection zone. Again, we actually have a code right now that she just pulled up, which is labeled tree protection and restoration. Now, one thing I noticed is that I think ours is actually 5 inches and not 4 inches, so we need to change that. But they would, as part of the development plan, come forward with how they're going to, they'll show all the trees that are required because our development standards require a certain amount of trees. And if they're 5 inches, which will probably change this to, they would have to show that those trees are not going to be cut down, that they'll be protected, whether they create buffers around the tree in the buffer zone so they won't, take those down as part of this. And again, it's meant to keep those species that we want to keep there and protected so they don't have to replace it. Because, what we don't want is they come in with a plan that shows all these trees, and then when they develop it, all those trees are gone. And so we're just requiring them to show us what they're going to do, how they're going to protect those trees as they go forward.
And in our code, it says obviously you can't leave all the trees up. You can't develop. That's.
Yeah, this is a very extensive tree protection restoration. So if you go down, I can't remember the exact section.
I was trying to look before
but
the
it's,
meeting, but I can't.
I don't. Oh, there's tree removal.
Yeah, you
Several
keep,
types of trees.
keep going. There is one. Here.
Tree plans.
Nope, yep. So they have to come, as part of this, they're gonna have to show their tree plan, because again, we require, based upon the type of development, a certain number of trees within the area they're developing. I think keep going down a little bit more was where it gets into the maintenance, because, there are some trees that we want there and we want to protect, but there's other trees that, are maybe invasive and aren't as good. It's all contained within this code.
You have a tree plan?
Again, this sounds, I think, more ominous than what it really is. And generally in development, because here in the city, we're not really developing large tracts of land. It's not as onerous as you might think. In this particular case, guessing about this particular development when it comes forward, they already have a lot of trees, and
this is just within the buffer zone. So
yeah,
it's not like they're going to develop in that area anyway.
Right. But there are going to be areas where they are going to develop, and they have to make sure that whatever they do complies.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be an issue in that particular case where we're going to say you have to add 50 trees, right? Mm-hmm. It's really going to be just make sure you don't eliminate trees to fall below what these minimums are.
Okay. Are we changing 4 to 5 inches?
Yeah.
What are we changing? 4 inches, and number 2 will be 5 inches.
Landscaping shall be consistent with the requirement standards for buffers, landscaping, tree protection of this LDC. Again, we do have standards. I forgot to give Ashley that if you wanted to look at what our landscaping code is. But again, we have that, and that's what we would be reviewing if they submitted this to the city as part of the review process. Recreational vehicle spaces and designated amenity and service areas shall not be located within the buffers required along the property boundaries. I mean, that's self-explanatory. Mm-hmm. Buffering landscape shall be continually and properly maintained. Obviously, if they come in with a plan that shows us, really beautiful trees and, no weeds and everything growing up, our expectations would be that that's what they maintain going forward as well.
If there's wooded area,
yep.
Does that need to be maintained as well, or is that
be natural, leave natural?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think the way that I would interpret this, which hopefully is the legal perspective of how this is, but is what we're trying to prevent is a pretty picture, but not the intent. So if it's kind of a natural, and non-invasive species, whatever those wild flowers or wild plants are, I'm not going to call them weeds, wild plants are there, and they say the way you see it is the way that we intend to do this. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It may not look pretty, but in fact, I mean, it's closer to what the natural is. And again, that's what we're trying to prevent from happening is something that's not natural to the area. If they came in, and I can't think of an invasive, there's certain ivies, right, that are invasive species. Bamboo. If they came in and said, hey, we want to put bamboo up all along here, we would be saying no bamboo.
No, I'm just saying that, if there's a wooded line that buffers the property, whatever, they don't have to go in there and dethatch it and all that.
No. Again, it's just, we want to make sure whatever they show us during the process is what they intend to do. And so if they, again, show a picture of, we're going to have, these palm trees, and that's all that's going to be there. And, 6 months later, it's palm trees and, just weeds and all this other stuff. Well, that's not what we approve.
Gotcha.
But if it's natural vegetation that's going to be there, that's what's going to be there.
Okay.
Any issues with those?
Nope. No, tree talk.
Oh, sorry.
More discussion. Internal roadways and circulation. The primary entrance and exit for the recreational vehicle park shall be from a collector or arterial classified roadway. So this is basically trying, to prevent it from being in the middle of a residential area. So it's a residential street, which isn't a collector or arterial. Those have specific definitions that, again, I should have written down to provide you, but those are more heavily traveled types of roadways than just a standard residential road. Parking spaces, so I guess any issues with that language? Nope. Parking spaces for ancillary uses associated with recreational vehicle park shall meet the minimum standards for parking space requirements of this land development code. So the example I'll give to you is if the recreational vehicle developer, parking developer says we're going to provide a store, a camping store, and we would look at that as a different use than the rest of the park. So within that plan, they would have to conform with whatever the code for a store, camping store would be. And again, we have specific parking requirements for all types of uses. And so we would look at whatever that use is and say, oh, you have to provide one parking space for, 5 shoppers or whatever that code would be for that particular use. So if they decide we're going to have a restaurant, there would be a parking requirement for that. Again, this would be part of the plan that they would submit to us in conformance.
So this wouldn't restrict at your campsite parking on the campsite.
No. Yeah. So this is for ancillary uses. It's something that is not necessary. I mean, I guess you could make the argument, well, what's an RV?
Comes in, he parks.
What's an RV park without a camp store? Well, you can have an RV park without a camp store. So the camp store would be an ancillary use. Because again, we don't know if, today it's only for the camp, but maybe down the road it's, for the neighborhood or for the city or whatever. And so what we don't want is now parking all over the place because, they sell a great, s'more there, right? And so everybody wants to go there to get their s'mores. We just want to make sure that, we have at least the right parking standards for those. The entrance of the internal private roadway shall be constructed of concrete for the first 50 feet and have a pavement width of 30 feet with 30-foot curb radius. So again, this is driving into the park off of that connector or arterial road.
Is there a reason why it's just limited to concrete and asphalt or another hard surface like that?
I think you could do that. I mean, I don't know. Again, this is language we stole directly from Crystal River.
Right.
You could easily have asphalt.
Or other qualified surface. I was looking at that. It changed the language of the previous.
Yeah. So a little bit later, because there was some conversation about, well, concrete and asphalt is too limiting, and maybe you could have something else. And looking at what others have allowed for that. To me, we extended to saying concrete, asphalt, or crushed limestone. And again, I think even when you ask the fire chief, which I'm sure you will, about that, I'm sure he will not have a lot of good things to say about crushed limestone. I've already talked to him. But I think in the entrance part, there's two purposes for having a hard base. One, you're going to have a lot of turning movements coming in and out of there. So you don't want it to start rutting and why concrete tends not to do some of the things that asphalt does with the pushing when you have large vehicles. Putting their brakes on there kind of shoves the asphalt, creates bad places there. So that's where they'll tend to break up first. Concrete doesn't undergo those same stresses. So I guess that would be my guess why they put concrete there. And I wouldn't disagree with that, but
Yeah. Might be an up north thing. I don't know. Concrete freezes different than block asphalt. So we have freezes. All of our roads are made of asphalt.
And I think again, I'm not I'm not saying. Yeah, I think where I would draw the line is when you get off of a very hard, durable surface. You're going to have a lot of maintenance issues, and a lot of issues, and again, I may not necessarily care about what happens to a large RV turning on there, but I know that I'm going to have $1 million piece of equipment at some point on those roads. I do care about that, and I don't want it to have issues stock or damage. But I think again those widths are important because it does help make sure that our fire equipment can get in and out. The ancillary benefit is for the users. Again, from my perspective, the users will be able to get their large pieces of equipment in and out there pretty safely and without damage.
So do we need to change that to not be just concrete?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make that concrete or asphalt, I don't think that would be an issue. Everybody okay with that?
The further on in on the interior roads, concrete, asphalt, of course, limestone. I think of millings, which is recycled asphalt. It almost becomes asphalt.
Right.
Even gravel, to a certain degree, depending on how it is. I mean, if these are interior roads, you want to keep kind of a campground feel, and if you pave it, it becomes less of that, and you're adding a lot of obviously expense to be able to do that. Is there a reason behind limiting that? I mean, obviously you don't want dirt roads in there. That's goes without saying, and maybe even gravel because it can hold up. But most campgrounds are gravel roads that leave on the interior, right? I mean, for the most part, they need to be well maintained. They get out of shape, but I don't think there's a reason why we force them to pave.
Well, I again, from our perspective, we looked at it and we're thinking of our equipment that we have to put on there. Mm-hmm. That's why we want a hard, durable surface that I mean, I guess the counter argument that I'll throw out there to my own argument right now, so we can make that argument amongst myself, is that they could easily let an asphalt or concrete road go to pot, and I would have that same issue with a fire engine going over there that isn't on there. I guess from a development standpoint, though, we're trying to start off with the best possible situation that we can have, and typically with whether it's concrete or asphalt roadway, the way it's designed is the last, where necessarily a gravel or dirt or a stone dust road is not necessarily designed to last. It's designed to be efficient as a road, but costly to maintain over time because you're constantly grading and making sure there's no potholes. And again, from a perspective of safety equipment, you want the best possible so you don't have to worry about it, hitting a pothole and damaging the equipment or causing an accident because it loses control. You want the best possible condition you can have. And again, I think you asked the chief that, he can probably say that in a lot better words than I just did. But again, these are the development standards that we feel are necessary to protect, the public safety equipment that we're going to be putting in there.
Well, this is, say you want to go well above this and you want to put brick roads in there.
Wouldn't put brick roads there. So, I mean, if there's a concrete base underneath that or asphalt base, yes.
Properly laid brick road would have that, right?
Well, properly, yes, but
I drove on roads in Paris that were better than our asphalt roads, and they were all brick.
Yeah, they probably don't have asphalt underneath that now, the way that they do it there.
They don't.
Yeah.
You could change that to 15 feet.
Yes.
Yeah, I already had
I have that marked. Nice big letters, yes.
I like all of this, including the 15 feet.
Yeah. So leave it as is with 15 feet and asphalt added to concrete.
What about millings? Let's just entertain that. What's your thought on millings with the fire?
What about what? I'm sorry?
Milling.
Recycled asphalt. They crunch up asphalt, they redeploy it, and it hardens. I mean, it's not as bad as and not as good as asphalt, but just about.
Listen, I want growth in the city, so don't take this the wrong way. I'm just gonna ponder a question. When we have new subdivisions come in and contractors come in and build place, we require them to build streets and sidewalks. So we have the apparatus access and room and safety for pedestrians. And so we're building a new park, whatever it may be. Again, we need to require apparatus access, and any roads that are not paved or concrete can be very subject to the weather. So, and to maintenance. So again, Mr. Koppler had mentioned maintenance of a paved road or a concrete road. It does need to take place, but it's minuscule in compared to maintenance of a lime rock road, crushed asphalt. Any of those other options are very subject to weather. I'm not, as familiar with the property, but I know Captain Quinn had talked to me about it before when this will come up. And one of the issues was that it has flooded before. The access roads have been underwater before. So knowing that history, it begs to differ what is a secure, solid surface. So again, I'm not the deciding factor as to whether you pave it or mill it or not. It needs to be like, Mr. Koppler said, a solid foundation for a fire truck to go. The road drain pipe has to be able to allow the apparatus to cross it. But,
Well, I mean, gravel can be problematic for sure. I guess millings is a popular choice that's lower cost, and I would argue it's probably a better product than crushed limestone.
Well, that also depends on how it's laid, how thick it's laid, how long it's been there, whether it's compacted or not. I've had friends that bought millings and put them in their yard and it just pushed down into the sand like it was never even there. I had a neighbor that did it by his dumpster where the garbage truck kept coming and put it out there. And again, because it wasn't thick enough, compacted right, so just to use the word millings is, fire department opinion.
The same thing on crushed limestone, if that's it'd be the same thing, if you don't pour it thick enough.
Exactly, which are really all unimproved roads.
Right.
Are we not removing crushed limestone? I thought we were going to remove that.
No, we leave it as is.
So the first part we added concrete. Yeah,
And asphalt, yes.
And the others they haven't.
I do want to say that that area has flooded. My neighbor used to own the skating rink that is right there, and I think she sold it, but they have had to change the floor in the skating rink 3 times, to my knowledge, minimum. So that area does flood to the point where it has ruined the skating rink.
There's a major drainage thing along the side there, so depending on the flood, I don't know if the actual property itself is flooded.
I've not been in the property. I'm just telling you about the skating rink adjacent to it.
Right, yeah.
So the skating rink has flooded.
Yeah.
So
To the point where it had to replace the floor 3 times, so on 3 separate occasions over the past 20 some odd years. So just to
and we're paying to, I apologize, Cherokee. We're paying to, repave the road by the trailer parks November and down there because of the potholes.
Mhm.
And those are asphalt. And and we're doing it for the safety of our first responders because of the potholes. So I think we need to, protect our equipment, our responders, and the people that are there.
So can you drive on crushed limestone? Is that an issue?
I mean, if it's maintained and compacted appropriately, sure. I mean, we're gonna go wherever we gotta go as long as the road will allow us to get there. Like I said, I'm not the deciding factor on whether it's paved or crushed or gravel, but it needs to be able to be maintained and sustained and taken care of on a regular basis. Otherwise, it's subject to weather.
Would that be in the overall site plan as well? And you guys would opine on whether that would be adequate for your service equipment?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, that would be part of the plan review process, correct?
Is that
Captain
enforceable for
Quinn and his
us?
team
I mean, it's a private property. So, you know, you can't say you've got to what's the term? Resurface it, fill the potholes. I mean, is that beyond our legal capabilities? I mean,
That would go back to like we talked about before, who's gonna inspect it, who's gonna monitor that.
Right.
You could, within this section, I guess you could add some language about maintaining it to a certain level. Then you at least would have the argument that this is it's in a contract at some point. We have an agreement. You need to keep your end of the bargain, and then you could have some more power behind you.
I just want to make sure that whatever we put in here, that we can,
So I don't
monitor.
know, I don't know off the top of my head, because I haven't had to deal with this, but other communities I've been in their code enforcement sections, property maintenance, it will talk about the facilities, think of a store, it has a parking lot, again, I would have to check here before I could say it, or Mike can say off the top of his head maybe, if that they don't take care of that parking lot and it just becomes, the moon, we should have the ability, and maybe not in this particular, but other places I've been, to say, property maintenance wise, you're not maintaining your property, this is a code violation, you need to fix it. I don't know if ours property maintenance allows for that or not.
I don't recall on top of my head about the parking lot, but we do have property maintenance in our code.
Yeah.
But I can't remember off the top of my head about that.
So we'd have to look to see that, but there may be that outlet to do that. Now, again, it may be not a proactive enforcement of that. It may be, someone, bent the rim on their very large RV and they come complaining to us about it and say, they haven't maintained that. Or it could be that we have to take, one of our engines in there for a medical response or a fire, and we bust the rim on that may, force that issue. But I would have to look to see if our codes, have that provision or not. But again, as a condition of approval, you could have that.
I'd like to see what the code has to say regarding that, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll look at that and get it to you before the next meeting.
I just hesitate to be so restrictive on internal roads, on a campground.
Yeah, no, I don't want to be restrictive either. I just want to make sure that we can get in there,
Yeah.
like I said, I drove down November and whatever, not too long ago, and the potholes were horrible on a paved road. I can't see somebody one of our emergency responders trying to get there in a hurry to.
No, the maintenance aspect, well, means, and again, if you look at it from the development that they put in, they want high-end customers coming in with big RVs. If I'm an owner there, I'm not going to come to some campground that's riddled with potholes and all that. So
I agree with that. Like
it's
I
a
said
kind of
before, we're
keeps
not
track.
doing it for these specific people. That we have to do it for the people who don't want that, who are just who are going to try to do it for other reasons. So.
But again, a campground
you don't see a lot of them. I'd venture to say hardly any that have all asphalt paved roads. But all I'm suggesting here is that, we do have crushed limestone. Again, millings is a popular thing. It's durable if it's done right. Again, I don't have a problem saying not gravel, but if it hits a point where it costs too much to lay the infrastructure down for roads and all that to actually do development, you're not going to get any development. So it's all for naught, right? Because paving and stuff is very expensive. And is it if it's what we want, okay, but do we really need it to be?
Well, let's look at the code and see what that has to say, and then we can go from there. How's that? Sure. Does that work okay for you?
Yeah.
The next one, all internal roadways shall be privately owned and maintained, just basically saying, it's your roads and you have to maintain them. Unless a different roadway configuration is approved by city council, the recreational vehicle park shall have a continuous path of travel throughout the recreational vehicle park with no dead end roadways unless a cul-de-sac is installed in accordance with city specifications. And originally, when I think we first talked about this, it kind of ended with no dead end roadways, and it didn't allow for cul-de-sacs. Looking at it again, if built to city specifications, they could have a dead end with a cul-de-sac. But again, the specifications will be what goes through the fire department to look at and say what the turning radius requirements are for their equipment.
Good on these.
Yep. Good.
No issues? Yeah. No. Signage. One, identification sign shall be allowed at the recreational park vehicle park's primary entry and exit. Said sign shall comply with applicable city sign regulations. So the sign regulations will control, the height, the size, and all that. This is basically just allowing for only one sign at the entranceway, and whatever the size and height would be dictated by the existing city sign regulations. Traffic direction shall be clearly visible at all internal roadways. Other internal directional information lines for the gains to the park are permitted. Utilities and refuse disposal, recreational vehicle parks shall be required to be connected to public water and sewer. Electricity shall be provided to each recreational vehicle space, vehicle parking pad. All electrical utility lines in the park shall be underground. All internal water and sewer shall be privately owned and maintained. All solid waste shall be contained, stored in sanitary and nuisance-free manner. Dumpster and or trash receptacles shall be provided and located in a central location, easily accessible to all recreational vehicle spaces.
Number 3, all internal water and sewer, should we say lines?
Sure, yeah. And I mean, because it could be that they may need a lift station to get it there, so it's not just the lines, it would be the other equipment necessary as well.
In other words, I didn't want to have a private water utility there or a private sewer there, because it really doesn't define it.
Yeah, well, the connection here, so it has to be, the infrastructure, whatever the infrastructure.
Yeah, we want to call it out.
Yeah, yep.
The only thing I had mentioned before was on number 2, the electricity shall be provided to each recreational vehicle space. Sometimes you have no hookups. Do we want to force every space to have electricity? And if so, we don't have water mandated. So is there a reason why, other than the fact that's what they have, is that we have to have electricity on each one of the spaces?
So is this, for the legal terms, is this mandatory or is it one of those that may?
This states you have to have electricity.
Shall, yeah, have to do it.
Yeah, I don't have a specific reason why that language is like that.
Because he's right. I mean, when you go to an RV park, there are a lot of them that have the electrical hookups, and then there's a couple that might not, for people who want to go rustic. Or people who just want a tent. Don't need an electrical hookup.
I mean, I don't know what the reason would be that we force electricity on each one of them. I mean, obviously, the more electricity hookups, water, sewer hookups you have, the more charge. Right, exactly. That, I mean, it's a nicer facility. But this is coming out the gate too. You know, some of that stuff I think gets added as time goes on as you develop, right, too. So you maybe start out with half of them like that and then work your way towards it as you. But you don't need electricity and water to keep your camp spot. I mean, you can park an RV in a Walmart parking lot and operate fine, right? So you just have to have obviously a place to dump out.
Well, that's later on.
Yeah. Up to the sewer. And even that doesn't say you have to have sewer in each one of the campsites. It's just the park itself has to have a sewer connection.
So that's what I'm looking. So again, provide you what the state requirements are. So it gets into the water and sewer hookup. So again, reason why this one probably doesn't say that for water and sewer. There's a whole set of state standards that they have to comply with. Whether they provide sewage for self-contained units or not. I mean, there's a whole another layer of review that happens with water and sewer. There isn't anything in the state code for electricity.
It was not.
No.
Yeah, there's nothing that I see that talks about electricity, but I'm just reading very quickly here. So
I agree.
Yeah, if anything, water is probably more important than electricity.
see anything on electricity.
So I would probably scratch that, or
I could make it a may. It may be provided. If you could scratch it and have the same result, but if you want something in there that addresses it, it could say that they may provide.
Well, we could leave it, say may be provided, and then say all electrical utility lines that are used or whatever, those shall be underground.
Oh, right, yeah, I agree they should be underground.
Yeah.
But
So I think if you wanted to change it and not make it a mandatory requirement, it could be electricity may be provided, and then obviously if it is, the lines need to be underground.
Yep, I like that better. I really think the goal is, as time goes on, they would be providing electricity to each one of those. But at the onset, obviously that's a costly thing, and if you're there for a couple nights or whatever, do you really need electricity? Not necessarily. I mean, you want it, but not required. Especially in our July and August months, right?
Anything else with that? Good.
Yep.
Common facilities, recreational areas, open space for common areas, playgrounds, and other recreational uses shall be provided at the rate of at least 20% of the gross area of the recreational vehicle park. The recreation area may include space for common walkways in related interior landscape areas. Recreation area may be comprised of facilities for active recreation, such as swimming pools or beaches, shuffleboard courts, or play lots for children. These facilities shall be located and interconnected by defined walkways to be readily available for all recreational vehicle spaces and separate from vehicular traffic flow.
The other question I had on the 20%, let's say that there's a lake, this particular one has a lake,
does that lake include, is that included in that 20% or is that? Because it specifies open space for common areas, playgrounds, I'm assuming out middle of the water is.
Well, it says gross area, so it was the same as the density for the other thing we talked about.
Well, it's,
Right.
So I would say, yes, the lake is included in that.
Swimming pools and beaches.
Right. Yes. I mean, you know, the key there is recreation area, right? And if that is considered a recreation area, you know, they can kayak, they can row a boat, they can swim.
That counts?
Swim with the alligator.
Yep.
Restrooms and bath facilities shall be located within 500 of any designated recreational vehicle space. Bicycle rack shall be provided at one space for every 10 recreational vehicle spaces. The developer is responsible for obtaining any and all permits and approvals required by the city and other federal, state, and local government permits to operate the recreational vehicle park as provided by the approved PUD master plan.
Is that, any comment on that? That sounds all right to you guys? Again, I don't really know. It sounds okay to us up here, but if that's way out of the norm, let us know. Yep.
Yeah, it's fine. What do you?
Go back, comment, by all means. As always. You guys are experts.
Lisa Froyland, 8301 Congress. I think the bathrooms, you know, I guess I'm not sure, I'm not quite understanding that. You have to have one within 500 feet of every RV. I mean, what's that?
What spot?
You just have to have one facility on the site.
Wherever you're at in an RV campground, you have to have a bathroom facility within 500 foot of you. That's what that says.
Any site or any one site?
Any designated space, right? Wherever you're at, there has to be within that space 500 feet as a bath facility. So you will never have to walk further than 500 foot to a bath facility. That's what that says, right? Am I reading that correctly?
That's why I read it.
Yeah.
That's how I read it too. That seems excessive. Most RVs come with their own bathroom. So I don't know that you need that many on site.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, that seems excessive. Like nowadays, you have full hookups. They all have their own.
I think that obviously the intent though is if you don't have that, you don't want to be
Should definitely be.
in the park. You got to walk all the way in front of the park to get to the bathroom. So it's you never know where they're going to be parked at that don't have the facilities in their RV. So let's think about that. So 500 foot. I wish I could football field. Oh, well, not quite right. 600 would be too. It's a little shorter than 2 football fields. That's pretty long distance. So that seemed, I mean, if I had to walk a football field, which is 300 feet, right?
Yeah, 100 yards. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this would be almost 2 football fields. Well, it seems plausible. That's what I figured to ask you guys, but
He says we're good. So.
I think so too. That's a pretty long distance, absolutely. For facilities.
I will add, I don't think that specifically is mentioned, but there's a lot of requirements in the Department of Health about bathing and restroom facilities. So it's much more than what we're asking.
Yeah, I tried to look in here. I don't see where it says, on this thing you gave us.
Yeah, it doesn't have the specific
It doesn't have
500
anything
feet,
specific about that.
but it talks about a lot of other requirements. I mean, toilets, how far the toilets have to be from people, there's a lot of different stuff.
Should we refer to the department?
That's not specifically in there, that the restrooms and bath facilities shall be located within 500 feet. I didn't see, I'm reading quickly, I didn't see that specific provision. I was just letting you know there are a lot of other things the Department of Health state's gonna require that we haven't even hit on about toilets and, other things. Yeah, so it's not, so I wouldn't refer, they're gonna have to follow that anyway, what the state's requiring. This is, it looks like what's added here was a little, in addition to that, but there is a lot of information in there.
Can we look into the health guidelines?
Yeah, I don't Yes, I can read it slower than I am now, but I don't see any.
Yeah,
One
I
sec.
don't see
I don't
that
think
either.
it's in there. This particular provision, it does have requirements about restrooms and other facilities, but I don't think the 500 feet from any designated recreational vehicle space is included.
Yeah, it looks like they just have like a minimum of one toilet, one urinal, one, you know, et cetera.
The only thing I see with feet is G,
Yep, that's where I said.
in permanent buildings, each toilet room shall be so located that no individual required to pass through a sleeping area other than his own. But the toilet facility shall be located no further than 200 feet from the door of each sleeping room.
That's permanent buildings, not.
Yeah,
RVs.
I know.
I don't think that.
That's the only thing I see regarding feet, distance. I don't see anything else.
I don't
here.
think it's in there. But there's some other requirements there too.
Well, what did you guys think fire system higher? So increase it to 600 maybe? I mean, I don't know what,
I think we should go with the Department of Health's guidelines.
well, they don't have
They
it.
don't have one.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
just their guidelines and not add any extra ones as far as like feet.
Oh, don't put any feet restriction
Yeah,
on it at
'cause
all?
they're gonna be required anyway by the Department of Health to have at least a bathroom on the site, so. I mean, it isn't, like they said too, like, most people don't use those. If you've got a bunch of kids in your RV, maybe you do.
Well, I will say this, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not so much the bathroom aspect of it as the shower. Because those RVs, it's tight showers or whatever. So at least in my experience, when I've been, I wouldn't use the shower in the RV. I would go to the shower house. Even though it's hooked up to the sewer, it's just more space. It's just easier to do that. But again, I'm not opposed to taking out any feet requirements on bathrooms. I mean, they need to have a bath facility there.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously this is written across the board. You want to have adequate facilities. What that is would depend on the layout of the property again. So you don't really know. Is that something we can control with a site plan?
Did we get that on Crystal River as well? Matt?
Yes. Yeah.
We got that at Crystal River as well?
Yeah. So you could, I would, again, I need to read it again. I've read it, the information from the state, but I don't remember all of it. You could just, for that provision, refer to what the Department of Health requires. You don't have to add anything extra. You don't even have to refer to it because they have to follow it anyway, but if you wanted to say something about it, you could just refer it to the, make sure it complies with the provisions from the Department of Health.
Should we just say that then?
You can.
That the restrooms and bathroom facilities will be required and comply with the state of Florida Health Department?
You can.
And then whatever their restriction is, it's got to comply anyway. We kill two birds with one stone.
Mike has input, I don't know. You're actually it's gonna be depicted by federal, because there's ADA requirements.
Right.
So it can be picked up during the process of whoever the designer is, because it's gonna be based on the number of RV spots, the amount of occupancy, based on how many parking spaces they're gonna have to have at these facilities, how many bathrooms they're gonna have, and the ADA requirements.
Yeah, I think we leave it up to that. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's a scratch to 500 foot.
So we'll just take
refer to
number
that.
2 out. Does it leave restrooms and bath facilities in, but say? restrooms
Should
and
be
bath
provided
facilities?
as dictated per
State, federal law.
state federal law.
Okay.
What's the state federal law on bicycle racks?
I don't know if there is one, but there might be.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Isn't that something with the bicycle racks? Isn't that something that they could just like do? Do we need to have that in city code? That sounds like something like Washington State or New York City would want. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure why.
Well, and don't these RVs carry their own bicycle rack when they move it into the facility?
Yeah, but the thing we obviously pull it off of there.
You pull it off and then you drive to around the park and they all have kickstands, right?
I assume that Christopher wanted that for some reason, but you don't have to. I don't believe there's anything that I have never researched anything about bicycle racks, but I
Yeah,
don't
I
believe
don't-
there's a provision that requires
I don't
that.
know why we would require that.
And she asked me what it's a bicycle. It's not, they can do what they want, whoever owns, I think, if they want to be able to secure bicycles for their people, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too.
That's right.
Number 3's gone. Good. Okay.
That's the one right there.
Yes, we're the developer of a recreational vehicle park, which is fully or partially designated special flood hazard area, shall provide the city with site plan delineating the SFHA, in which shall include a statement attesting to the base flood elevation as has been established by FEMA and certified by a licensed professional engineer registered in the state of Florida. And then lighting all common access routes, roadways, internal streets, off-street parking areas, and service buildings within the RV park shall have adequate lighting to ensure visibility with such areas of light, such areas at night by park resident guests and public safety personnel who might be called to the park at night. So we don't have within our code anything specific about lighting, or this would have referred back to it. And so this is just a general statement saying that they will have adequate lighting, and that would be determined as part of the review process.
Can we put something in there, since this has been discussed previous, that we ask that they put some sort of buffers if there are the big street lights, keep it secured to the one area instead of to decrease light pollution,
Yes,
etc.
right.
Can we ask that they're
Shielding, you mean?
the shields are? I'm not quite sure what exactly. I know we talked about it, but it was a long time ago. The shields. I mean,
So, yeah, 'cause, and, I'm kind of surprised we don't have anything about lighting. I mean, there's kind of in unspecific lighting requirements for like subdivisions, but that's about as far as we go. So the answer could be yes. It could also be a part of the approval condition that any lighting provided internal to the park has to have shielding to reduce light pollution. I mean,
do we have any that like with Walmart, considering that's next to residential areas? Do they have shields or anything like that to keep their lights? I'm looking
just
around because I don't know who's going to answer the question.
They
If
point
anybody
straight
can.
down, so they have obviously a cone that goes around them. But
well, generally, the lighting requirements, they have kind of, I think it's called spillage. They can only spill over a certain amount off of their property. And so that, but again, that's different than what you're bringing up about, the shielding, make sure it all stays down and not up. Because, some lights, not so much with LED lights that tend to force it down. But normal lights that you put in would have that effect that goes up. This is an area I think that we do need to look at our code to address this, because I think there is a lot of movement towards reducing the amount of light pollution. And again, our location where we're at by the Gulf, it's kind of a unique feature that we could have if we do that. So we do need to look at that and add a section to our code about it. But again, here the thinking is that could take a length of time, not a fence code length of time, but it could take an amount of time, and we're kind of in the middle of this. So I thought it's best to leave it really to the review process, and when they come here, you can look at that and make that determination.
that's good. Yeah.
Hold on, you can turn your clicker on. Okay, fine. There you go.
Oh, so we made it through the whole code. Thank you very much. I think the only other thing I wanted to address there, I did get a question about what type of financial benefit does any development bring to the city? And in particular, what we would see with an RV park. So when I'm not an expert on this, so keep that in mind. But the second part is going to be very general. So, obviously, whenever you develop a piece of land, you have the current value, and then you have the value of development. So again, not knowing the change that's going to happen and what that land assessment is going to go from to, it's kind of hard to say that you're going to get, a windfall from just the development itself based upon the property taxes. But generally, in looking at some of the before and after of other RV parks, I mean, it's pretty clear that the value of the land goes up because of the use. Again, it's specific to the assessor and all this other stuff, so there's really no way to say, the land is valued at $1 today and it'll be valued at 10 times that because you have an RV park. So there is a benefit. Of course, in our case, we go into the CRA, so there's a benefit to the CRA. Related to any type of taxing that may come off of it, and looking at it, so I learned a lot about sales tax in the state of Florida. Thank you. Not want to, but I did. It again, there will be a tax on whatever the rental rate for the spaces will be, and that impact to us is most likely contained. And so I have to put a lot of caveats to this because I could be proven wrong, and if I am, great. But it would appear that the biggest influence on that would be our share of the penny for Pasco. So, that 1 cent per, of what we're going to get 0.67 of that penny.
0.67%.
Right. So that would be where we would gain on that. Now, the county, and I believe I looked at this, the county is one of the, Pasco County is one of the counties in the state of Florida that actually charges an extra 5% on transient lodging, which this would be the case. So the county, and I don't believe we get, 0.67% of that penny that I think goes directly to the county. So we wouldn't see the benefit of that. So again, there would be some benefit on the tax side for the penny for Pasco. Again, not knowing specifically what the rental rates are going to be and the breakdown, the magic math that happens at the state to determine what ultimately we get. I think there is the other type of, thought that if you have this use there's going to be people that's going to want to go out to a restaurant or go to the store. So there is a spin-off benefit also to the community as well. Again, can't come up with a number for you, and I would be a fool to try to give you a number on it. But again, any type of lodging tends to have spin-off with people going to restaurants or going to stores. This particular type, those that want to be self-contained and cook, they'll be going to a store to pick up supplies for that. So there would be some benefit there, but again, I can't give you a direct dollar benefit to that.
So I got a question on the lodging piece. Since Port Richey has no lodging facility within our city limits, but Newport Richey, wonder if we reach out to Newport Richey and ask them, because they got some hotels there. Are they getting any benefit from that, or what the county has is that all directly going into the city, not the county? I'm just wondering if there's exceptions there.
I can ask that question tomorrow to the manager.
Maybe work that way. Maybe there's a little secret that they have.
Yep. Definitely.
And the sales tax is less than 1% of what we get.
Yeah, we get 0.67%.
So we don't get 0.67 of a penny. We get much. It's
right.
Okay.
0.67%.
Percent of a penny. Less than 1%. Okay.
With that, is there any further discussion? Anybody from the public like to speak on that topic? See, I'll bring it back. Just a quick comment. I think this was a great format meeting to talk about, especially something large like this. So I appreciate y'all. We're in 9:30, so we've been here quite a while. So I appreciate the effort.
Imagine if we would have done this last Tuesday. Holy
Exactly,
Toledo.
exactly. That's, so I think we should entertain more of these when we have something of this substance that we should talk about to actually drill down details, and it helps us make better rules for the community. So I appreciate y'all's diligence here. Is there any old business you'd like to bring up? If not, look for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.